Do we have any additions or changes?
Did my letter get on?
There's a, discuss the support letter for Tack Factory property.
Yeah.
There's trails, and then partial, discussion of partial CFC for Hadley Road. Right?
Okay.
Those are the things to,
Well, those are possible additions.
okay,
Yeah.
all right. So I take a motion to accept the agenda with
I
those.
make a motion that we accept the agenda with the add-ons.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Great. So why don't we just go into Toll Brothers this evening?
Bring another chair up. Pull on that stuff. Hi.
Good evening.
Hi, Bill Orenberg. I'm here tonight with Jeff Lease, my partner, and with Dave Buckley and Scott Michelli from Toll Brothers and Mark Manganello, who you all know. Since we were here the last time, just to report just a little bit of an update, we did have a penultimate meeting with the planning board, went through all 95 conditions. Basically, we agree on all of them. We're just working out language on about 4 or 5 of them, and at the next meeting, they're going to sign the decision. The 4 or 5 have nothing to do with stormwater or any conservation-related issues, so we're there. In addition to that, subsequent to the last meeting, and I know we're working on some conditions and some other issues along those lines, just for reference, the board not to be presumptuous, Mark Manganello did provide at least a set of, he went through, put together a set of conditions, at least something to discuss, which also incorporated, we thought were all the standard conditions that you usually use, plus the ones in the Horsley Witten recommendation letter from Amy Ball. So I don't know, we sent those over to Amy, which is kind of the base of it. So I guess that's where we are. One of the things Amy and I had discussion today, she was kind enough just talking anticipation to cut down. One of the things procedurally in this development that's worked quite well, and I know oftentimes the protocol of the commission is that you close a hearing and then after that, and I know part of this is reiterative, we discussed this the last time. As far as the conditions, what I would like to ask the commission to do, and the reason for that is, once a hearing's closed, if it turned out during the course of some type of discussion, needs some additional information, then it's a procedural problem actually to put something into the record, or also to have an open dialogue about things relating to that. So what I would ask the commission to do is that we're able to discuss these, if there's any other issues that the commission has, any particular things, we can address those. In that basically, that we leave the meeting open until we're ready to vote this. When we're ready to vote it, then we can close it and vote it. That's all.
So we've had an opportunity, been busy with a number of things, but commission members have talked some with each other, talking with Amy, trying to get to this set of orders as well, because it's one of the largest projects we've seen for here. It has a big impact on our town. For us, it's the environmental issues that we have the concern. And so I think we're working towards a list. Maybe we can discuss some of them tonight.
Sure.
Just put them out there because it should be something that's public. And then I think we're fairly close to having those things put together, which hopefully seem reasonable. Obviously, our intent is to protect as much of the wetlands as we can, and I have to say that from the get-go, even when we did the ANRAD, we laid out to the developer what we thought were important to this, and I think that they've tried to hit many of those areas in terms of keeping the open space in all together, the drainage issues, the vegetated as can be done. So we think that's worked well, and I think it's more the nuts and bolts of some of the things that will come together so that we're assured that what we'd like to see happen does, or if there's a misunderstanding between us as we've gone through this process, to get it ironed out before the,
Agreed.
before the ball drops.
Sure.
So, Amy, we've talked about a few things. I don't know if you want to run through quickly where you're at. And the other good part is Amy's provided the commission with some orders for a couple of larger jobs, so we're just taking a look at those in conjunction with that.
Did everyone in the commission get a copy of Mark Manganello's documents? No.
No.
I think I did, but we could certainly,
Yeah, no, those were circulated.
I'm not saying it wasn't circulated. I think I forgot to print
Yeah,
it.
there's a hard copy for everyone.
Oh.
Yeah.
And,
You know that the ink in those inkjet printers expensive.
You may not have paid
Well,
attention
I'm
to it
usually
because
very
it came in
good.
after the deadline, so it could be, I'm not sure.
We just
I
want
do,
you to
you
hand
know,
them
I
to
do
us.
remember seeing it.
I
didn't delete it, I didn't print it.
I always gave these things to my parents at Christmas, and then they, then they dashed them.
These
Yeah.
actually look very similar to what,
Yeah,
Yeah.
the only thing, just to point out, that Mark informed me that he did, is he looked at this with an eye towards project-specific things, to make sure, because oftentimes, whenever you get prior orders, there's site-specific issues and whatever, and one of the things, one of the things you were, I think Amy mentioned that you were also looking for conditions was the Iron Tosca project. And we actually went through that, and there's a bunch of very, very site-specific issues in there. And if any of those are going to be adopted, from a condition standpoint, it's worked very well with the planning board. 90-something% of the time we're in agreement, but the ability to discuss it, because usually, sometimes you can achieve something more than one way, and sometimes there's a technical, whether it's a legal provision or a engineering thing, that you can do the same thing, but the language has to be different.
Sure.
That's all.
And we're willing to discuss those.
Right.
Amy, why don't you just rattle off a few of the ones that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, a few, so this is a compilation of comments that I have from different commissioners. Just ones that we are thinking about incorporating have to do with turtle habitat, concrete east of Hatherley Road, sweep and clean up marsh east of Hatherley,
Bill.
vernal pool cleanup.
Just going to touch on that one for a second. So part of this process, my understanding is that the town will wind up with the marsh between Hatherley Road and Oceanside.
Right.
And so a few years ago, during cleanup day, Scout took
Right.
on that project, and we lugged 10-wheeler loads worth of debris out of that piece of property. I'm sure a lot of it's still cleaned out, probably some's gotten back in there. There's probably encroachment from the seawall contractor on that property. So that's one that,
Well,
yeah.
I don't know if you want Amy to go through, or if you want to go one by one, we can respond to those, or give our thoughts, or I don't know if you want them all out, and then
Oh.
I'll try to write them down and remember them.
Okay, well, why don't we keep going then?
Sure, I mean, I think that the purpose is just to get these out here, not to commit or to have a particular engaging discussion about it, but, okay, so, sweep and clean marsh east of Hatherley Road, vernal pool, clean it up, signage, the plantings, which are already covered in the replication plan, ongoing replication conditions, interim as-built, environmental peer review paid for by applicant, O&M plan. A lot of these also are standard conditions that we do, you know, like record and make the O&M plan, the long-term pollution prevention plan, part of the order of conditions. Grubbing as necessary per phase. And then there was a question about public access, which I think goes back to the one that we just paused at in the marsh. So that's what we have.
With regard to the public access, is any of the property between Tilden Road and Hadley Road going to be open space, or is it all going to be maintained by the,
The answer is, it is permanent open space, but it's under the open space provisions and controlled by the homeowners association.
Okay.
We had a discussion with this at the planning board, and there isn't, as a practical matter, the public's gonna be all over the place. But there isn't gonna be a deeded public access here, for the simple reason is it's multiple for a reason, but one, from an insurance standpoint, you got a real problem. And two, particularly, you have pretty extensive walking trails and other thing. All of a sudden, if someone's out throwing beer cans around and whatever, you have no enforcement mechanism to deal with it if someone's saying as well, it's public access, I can do what I want. So the answer is to that, as a practical matter, the public, if there's no issues or problems, I'm sure the public will be using it a lot, but it isn't specifically designated because the management of this is in the insurances under the homeowners association.
and we had a similar issue with Whitcomb Pines with that. We were trying to work out something with a scout to, there was supposed to be some trails that were built
Right.
by the scouts, and then there was that conflict of who's got the liability.
Yes, Penny?
One question, as time goes on,
Yes.
5 years from now, and if I'm still around, I'd like to go out and make sure that the habitat, the I don't know what the word is now.
Replication.
Replication is up to snuff, that
The
it
commi-
hasn't been,
The commission members always have access.
okay, that's all, because, sometimes you never know once a
Sure.
project's done, and everybody goes away, and, we're gonna plant grass here, we're gonna plant
Right.
a miniature golf course, something else, and
Right.
we just wanna make sure, because the replication is really important out there.
They hit off, and unless I don't mean to be ad hoc, but to pick
Sure.
off a couple of things. Having to do with the turtles, and again, number 22, Mark already had some proposed language, I think it's in accordance with Horsley Whitman, isn't it? That was-
Yes.
We adopted their language verbatim. In addition to that, as far as the concrete on the east side, that's already shown in our, in other words, in our stormwater plan and all that, it shows how we're dealing with all those issues. In other words, what we're doing on the east side of the A&R lots.
All the concrete has to be removed.
Okay.
Just wanted to be sure.
Yeah.
In addition to that, and this is more of a logistical issue, as far as cleaning the marsh and this and that or the other thing, what is presently, one of two things is going to happen. Right now, we're in the process of finalizing an agreement with the selectmen, which is, for lack of a better word, an off-site mitigation thing, a component of which will be funding a water and sewer study for the town of Scituate is pretty extensive. Actually building a ball field at Wampatuck School, it's a substantial undertaking, bathrooms down at the beach, and some other things. And one of the things, in addition to that, this land is going to be taken over, but we're going to defer to the town as to how they want to handle it. So likely, one of two things is going to happen, or a combination of these. Either A, it is going to be under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission, some or all of it, if A, you want to do it, and B, the selectmen want to do it that way, in combination with, those portions that aren't under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission would have to be at the fall town meeting accepted as a gift to the town. And one of the discussions prior to that is, I would think an appropriate time talking about cleaning it, doing this, that, or other things, because the bottom line is the town doesn't have to accept it if they don't want to accept it. And we've already offered that, but that's kind of a moving, piece, and you'd have to quantify it. So my recommendation is, first of all, that portion we're talking about is non-locus to our orders of conditions right now anyhow, because our order of conditions end at the rear lot line of the A&R lots on the east side. And all this land is eastward of that.
The only thing, Bill, I would, in terms of, mitigation for the whole project. I mean, I think the commission's been willing to work with the developer. There was isolated wetlands issues. There's some units that are closer than 50 feet to a buffer. So in those cases, we know that we're getting a good amount of replication.
Right.
And that's all positive. But that's really working on the site, and that property is going to be held by the homeowners association. So looking for stuff that's outside of that to benefit the town, certainly the things you mentioned, a ball field or bathrooms and stuff is a great town benefit, and I think it's a win-win for everybody. It makes the town better, which makes the project better. From the commission standpoint, our purview is pretty much trying to protect open space or wetlands issues. And so I think that we would certainly have an interest. And I realize that there's a lot of players in this.
Right.
But to make sure that that marsh is protected is certainly within the realm of the commission. So we need to talk about that a little bit.
When you say protected, what do you mean protected?
Well, we just, however it's going to wind up being held, whether, I know it's a marsh, so it's protected anyways.
Right.
But let's just say that it isn't conveyed to the town, that it remains with this association. Is there some agreement that that's going to be kept reasonably clear? I realize it's probably not the trash from the homeowners association. It's overwashed from storms, and it's neighbors, and a bunch of that is problematic. So I'm assuming that you guys want to move it on in some fashion. You don't want to be holding the bag on that piece of property. But I don't know how.
Well, let's discuss this. What do you have in mind? Let's.
Well, no, I
don't want.
and we don't want, and there's a whole bunch of things that go on with the town that are outside of the commission per se.
Right.
The selectmen have the ability to decide where that's going, and you guys shouldn't be in the middle of something like that. We just need to find a way to be sure that it's properly protected, and it isn't left in limbo as we go through that.
So just, Frank, just to, if I'm hearing you correctly, one of the issues, or one of the requirements of the planning board process under the zoning regulations is that the planning board has to, there's some provision that talks about open space and the preservation of open space and ensuring that those open space parcels are protected. So the mechanism that was used to do that was to put some provision, I believe, in the homeowners association agreement that talked about these common areas.
But I think what Frank's talking about is the land down near the water that's outside of the association.
Okay, down
Right.
on the Pursuit Valley Road, all right.
Right.
So that's out, yeah.
So I just don't want to be in this spot where, we think the selectmen's got it, they think we got it.
Yeah, but what I'm just saying is, any of these things, this is why I'm saying is to quantify this, but I don't know if there's $1 million worth of cleanup or whether it's $5,000. I don't know. That's what.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't think it's a big deal, but.
Okay.
I just, that was my thought. And what I was thinking, we did have a real good cleanup a few years ago. I don't think there's a lot of stuff in there, but my thought why that, was brought up was you're going to have dumpsters there, you're going to have, manpower and stuff. And basically just a bunch of guys swept through, and if there's any big stuff, pull it out.
I think when we walked it, when we were walking that property and walking the edge and looking at the delineation way back during the ORAD, there's tires, there's debris and stuff that's sort of right on that edge. People have been dumping stuff, unfortunately, out on that property for a long time. And there were old roads before they blocked them off and stuff. So those are the sort of things, I think a lot of that falls right on the edge between the upland and the marsh that needs to get addressed.
So, let's talk about this. We have this, but what I'm saying is, in an order, I think the first mandate would be, is it any area of that, there's an ongoing condition, that if anyone wants to hand remove, debris or non-natural thing, that they have permission to do that. That'd be the starting point, because in the absence of that, you can't do anything. Right?
There's some stuff that's in there that's big enough, they may want to use a machine to do that, and I wouldn't have a problem on the onset, they're clearing and everything to get as much stuff out of there as possible. It's the time to do it when the work's being done.
So, but just so I can get this, are you looking for our guys to try to do that, or are you looking for money for someone else to do that?
I would think it would be the developer would take care of it on the onset.
Yeah, so how do you quantify that, though?
Well, I'm sure we can come up with something. I mean, this is probably work that's in the buffer.
You've been out there, Mark, what's up there?
Anything where the porphyry between the marsh and the single family is gonna get cleaned up in the natural process of cleaning up concrete, so.
This is, he's talking more like down the hill,
All the way
into
to
the,
the
into the
side.
marsh. There was some big stuff in there.
There's a multitude of stuff throughout there.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it lately. A lot of it is debris.
So let us see if we can come up with something
Okay.
that addresses that. And what I'd like to do is between now and, I'm assuming that we're gonna vote this at the May 7th meeting. Let's get a dialogue so we can come up with some, what I'd like to do.
You don't get to vote on it.
Oh, I know.
There was a we thing there, right?
I mean in the Lindberghian sense. How's that?
Yeah. I know you'd like to, but
Okay, so we have that.
Yeah.
By the way, FYI, as any of this concrete, one of the things that, relating to that, initially, we were bringing a concrete crushing machine on site to do this, and one of our conditions in the planning board is
Then it's going to be made to the town.
no concrete crushing machines.
really,
Yeah,
So what are you gonna do with the?
you gotta haul it off-site and crush it.
pick it up. Yeah, that's what they wanted. Mark, what were the other things that were?
From the draft order?
No, I mean, the things
Oh,
that
on
were
the
just ticking
list?
off, yeah.
Well, we had clean up the vernal pool and some signage. So
Yep.
we talked about that at a hearing a couple meetings ago. So that sounds like it's a similar exercise. One time, go in, remove by hand, the noticeable debris that's in there.
Yep.
And then some type of signage to discourage people in the area from putting more in there, basically.
Right.
I think we talked about there being some limitations there.
We can only do it on our property.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because of, right. And that maybe we could use the town right-of-way as a place where we could potentially put up a sign if we can't put it on private property that we don't have access to.
Well, we could tell the owners of the property now that we're not gonna approve it unless they clean up the other part, and maybe that'll put the motivation on them to clean up the other side of it.
You can do anything, but you can, they're not a party to this, unfortunately.
Right. And then,
One-
the other,
one-
go ahead.
One of the other things that, just to talk to, Amy and I talked about this earlier today, because she was querying about, well, when you're doing this replication work, what happens to an unforeseen thing if someone goes out of business? How do you deal with all this stuff? And a couple things that you should be aware of. This is probably, I shouldn't say it's the first time in the town of Scituate, but it probably is. Normally in developments, what happens is a planning board will put a covenant on, a performance covenant on property. And in turn, usually what happens is someone runs out and does about 80 or 90% of the infrastructure. Then the DPW prices out what the balance of that is. And then a bonding company issues a surety bond for the balance of that to make sure that's done. One of the things that Toll Brothers is doing at the outside is we're bonding the entire project, which is a very expensive endeavor. And so what is going to happen is under our development, Horsley, Witten, and DPW is actually going to price out of whatever X number of millions of dollars it is to do all this. And we're going to have a surety bond, boom, it's there. So the assurance is there. But the second aspect is that during the process of this, as when we get down to the sale of, when there's actually sales of things, we're gonna have to come before the commission to ask for, you know, partial certificates of compliance and things along those lines. So we already have a very large surety bonding thing that includes everything, and as part of that, you can double check, as part of the infrastructure, the, you know, the replication is included in that.
That actually answers a question that I hadn't had the chance to pose yet. This is being done in stages, as I understand it.
Yes.
And at the end of each stage, you may be back. Is that what you were saying, basically for
Well,
partial?
No, with the, well, two things. One, let's talk about, just to explain the planning board. The side that's to the furthest to the east, which is away on the Hadley Road side, probably, am I right in saying it's probably like 3/4 of the units are in phase one, or 2/3, something like that?
It's more than half. It's,
That's like 2/3.
yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
2/3.
it's 2/3, and so what is happening is having to do with a lot of things. Under the planning, under the decision, we're building phase one, okay? And part of this has to do with a lot of things. It has to do with, we're gonna get into phase one, do all of phase one. We have to go to the planning board before the commencement of phase two. And the reason of that is they just don't, they didn't want us in to cut everything on phase two before we do that. The caveat, though, amongst other things, and I believe, talking today, I think all of our, I think substantially all of our work is in phase one, isn't it, as far as the replication?
Yes.
It's all in phase one anyhow. So all that's gonna be done, and what's happening is just on phase two, when we go to build the Wampatuck ball field, we're gonna probably come in through the back there, just so to keep all trucks and everything off of Tilden Road. So in other words, we'll come through the back of the project, because the ball field's gonna be behind Wampatuck School.
Anybody else? Bill, the other piece that I've brought up since the get-go was dealing with the Scituate Brook and how we deal with that. And I'm waiting for an answer back from Town Administrator, Director of Planning, on how that's going to get funded. I realize that you have had multiple discussions with the town
Right.
about mitigation or funding different projects.
Right.
And I'm assuming that that falls within that, because we are looking for something that's positive from the commission standpoint for the town. You know, a ball field's certainly good for lots of residents in town, the bathrooms at the.
But again, just so we understand what we're talking about, are we talking about debris that's in like the head of the?
No, I think what I'd like to get is I'd like to find a way to kick off a cleanup and restoration of the Scituate Brook. And my thinking is it's more of a study, a way to come up with a plan that then we could use to go forward to get some grants or to get some other funding, is how I viewed it. We'd get wetlands-type folks on board, you know, something like CLE or Horsley Witten or whatever, that would review the brook, make their recommendations, you know, whether we gotta clean it out, how do we get it, the water cleaner, that sort of thing. So we have something to go with, and then we would use that to springboard into maybe some grants or other funding, CPC or whatever, say, listen, we got a plan now to clean up Scituate Brook.
So-
And here's how we want to do it.
All right, so there's two ways we can look at that. One is, as you first suggested, is to talk with the town administrator about that and how it fits in, but it is in all things, that's kind of, and I understand purposely, it's amorphous, because you don't know what it is you want to do. You have a concept, but not a definitive, and you're not going to know what's definitive until you do the study.
Right.
And so what it sounds like to me is you have to, and I understand if it's something to start something going that'll hopefully feed into other grants and things, that's fine. But I think we got to quantify what we're talking about here. Are we talking about $5,000, or are we talking about $500,000?
And I've asked that question, and we're trying to get something back from a couple of groups or companies that might do that, and say, what would that sort of project typically cost?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, without getting the issue I'm getting at is Scituate Brook is several miles long.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this could be a $500,000 study of the
No,
watershed.
yeah, yeah.
Or you can look at the first 200 yards in from Tilden Road.
My hope is that it's not that sort of thing, that we can come up with some way to, and again, we're trying to get this out as quick as we can, or not quick enough, but just somebody to come back to me and say, listen, when we've done the Eel River, or when we've done whatever, the first step in that was to,
I thought it was donuts and coffee was the first thing. We get fun of that.
you're a sport. Not without discussing it. Let's see if we can't pull something together on that, and,
Yeah, but just as well, you're aware of the fact that these are all moving pieces, and we're kind of getting down to
I
the
understand.
short strokes, and I mean,
Yep.
there's an enormous amount of, apart from,
And I've been asking the question for a while.
understood, but what I'm just saying is, there's a huge sum of money in mitigation between projects and funding that we're already doing. And one of these things that isn't quote mitigation is, we're requested as part of the process to do certain design and element changes in these buildings that literally cost millions of dollars that we're getting no recompense for. So there's already a lot out there that, in other words, hasn't been before your board, and I know it's not your concern, but just to put it in perspective.
Right. Well, everybody's getting their bite of the apple, but our concern,
We want to fight.
and I believe me, I don't take this lightly. I know it's a critical piece, and it's important to everybody. You know, these projects, you don't take these things on. There's a lot of cost and a lot of time that goes into this, so I get it. I'm trying to look out for the issues that involve our commission.
Understood.
So let's see if we can come up with something like
All right.
that, all right? Anybody else have a question or thought? Amy, you want to add anything else for this evening? So everybody understands, this is the process. We're winding down towards the order of conditions, and we're trying to work on all the elements of that. An order of conditions typically has multiple lines of different things, are things that we'd expect the developer to perform and do during the project, either during construction or when it's finished. So that's where we're at. Is there anybody in the audience that has any questions? Okay. All right.
Well, let me just ask a couple, and this is procedurally and how to go with this, because it would be gratefully helpful, because what my goal is, and it worked very well, the planning board, is, and I know you're looking at various things and incorporating things, but we put in Word format, Mark put in Word format, this document here, is it possible, in other words, we start with this, from a commission standpoint and from Amy's standpoint, you modify it, blackline it, or whatever, because we'll commit that we'll have this ready so that when we're back here, if there's any, and again, as a practical matter, if there's, I'm not saying presently there'll be more, but if there's 40 conditions here, we'll, at the next meeting, if we have this and we're able to do this, we'll come back and we'll say 36 of those are fine. You don't have to, they're done. So let's talk about these 3 things, or in hopeful, we've already talked about that, because just in my mind, what I'm talking about on this, those 2 issues which you did raise, the east side marsh and the west side brook here, one of the kind of fundamental issues, we don't know this, if it's something that, from a TA selectman standpoint, you say, okay, we feel comfortable that provisions are being taken in this situation to have that done. But I'm being frank also. When you vote this order, that will not be a signed document at that point. All right, it will be a signed document probably within the next 30 days or something like that.
Right.
So in other words, I don't want you to, misrepresent. So I know I don't want to misconstrue what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is, and that's another whole set of issues, if this is something that is going to be embedded into the order we're very concerned, we have to make sure that the language is such that
We understand.
it's not a deal stopper for us.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess to get back to it is, are we okay with adding, modifying that? So at least we have, we're not starting from ground zero. And from Mark's standpoint, this is verbatim. This isn't like this is from the town of Ipswich. These are Scituates taken from all the standing conditions from when he orders. So I think there's 38 of them there. I think 35 of them are the ones that you always use.
So I mean, basically you're saying, do we want to follow the format that Mark's laid out in these pieces and what he has in here?
Right, no
We'll go
make and
through them.
modify. What I'm just trying to do is to be able to be responsive to the agent and the commission so that we get this, so that we're not here next time saying that we're unable to take action because we haven't been able to put
Do
it
we
together.
have the same, our standing orders, do we have those in a Word document that we could do it the other way and say,
Yeah, so we can take our standing order and try to incorporate.
it seems like Mark had done that, a lot of these already are, but.
Yeah, but I think we need to really cross-reference to make sure that the intent hasn't been modified or changed from what you guys usually use.
That's what I'm reading right now.
The language.
Oh,
the
word by word to
language
make
in
sure
the
it can match.
document
Oh, yeah, that's good.
For the standard conditions was utilized for, using the template of the Ann Vinyl Road, which was,
Probably the most recent type of,
right.
development, substantial development that you.
Less line 23 or whatever it is.
Yeah, but we already,
30.
I think it was outdated though.
Less line
So I don't
30.
think I would have used that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was out, Dave?
Well,
Wasn't it just last month?
wasn't it just last time you guys were, or Bill was here, we identified some things and we think that was.
It was a
more than-
carryover
that was
from
a
the.
Well,
carryover.
yeah, what I'm saying is those two things are out,
Could
but,
have been a better
but,
model.
but what I'm saying is that if
Why
you,
don't we use that one, yeah.
what the direction mark, that is your standard order. So what I'm saying is if you confirm it's there, and I believe that the only difference is, it's been, if there's any modifications of that, I believe they've been highlighted in there.
Okay,
So this isn't something where there's a buried word in there or something.
all right.
You can take a look at it and get back to them about that.
But I think we need to,
Because we're gonna add.
Huh?
but you have the
What do you
ability.
see what weighs more?
Yeah.
Oh, I know what weighs more. I already know which
That's
one
heavy
weighs
bond
more.
paper, yeah.
But, in all honesty, this is good.
Yeah.
But there's stuff that's gonna be pulled out of this one and put in there.
That's fine.
That's fine, we
Add-
expect
add to
that.
it. Oh, understood, it's
So
added to.
it's like, I personally do not have any problem with what Mark gave us. But I know we're gonna add to it.
That's fine, and that's understood, yes.
Okay.
But I'm just conscious of the fact that we're only 14 days away, and I know you guys
Yeah.
are busy and
Sure.
whatever. I know Amy and Carol are upside down and backwards, so I just wanted to, Mark did that in a sense of
Yeah, no, and I appreciate
trying to
it.
take a jump start, that's
Yep.
all. All right, so, I guess between now and then, is these things, we get the conditions, we get these, so in other words, we'll get full commentary back to Amy on these things, so in other words, so we're sitting here, and again, from your standpoint, you're not getting,
Can we,
Next Monday.
I guess what I want to have is a timeline and say, it's Monday. Do we want to try to address some of this stuff by Thursday of this week or Monday of next week? What day can we say we've got most of our things together here? Or not most of them, but we've got a good outline done so that we're not waiting until,
so we can get the commentary
Right.
back to you.
Yeah, what you,
what do you think? Can we respond to this by, say, Thursday or Friday of this week?
No.
Well,
No, I mean, Monday, I would say we should be able to maybe have something together.
all right, well, if we have anything substantial during the week, I think it would be good to get that back to Mark, even if it's a partial or whatever, that we can at least get that going.
Mark.
Yeah.
Or Bill.
To Mark's
I think to Mark
Mark's
is,
directive.
I mean, I'd rather just lock Penny and Mark in a room and let them come up with a
Right,
thing.
a working draft to Mark
Yeah.
by next Monday.
All right, but let's see if we have anything that we can offer before that we can get it going.
All right, and our expectation is, just to make sure we don't have expectation wrong, is that the next meeting, we'll go through the conditions and close the meeting and vote it.
We're gonna do our best.
I'm gonna try real hard.
I understand what you would like to have, and then we'd like to get this to that point, too.
Just understand that the planning board has 95 conditions. Many of them deal with stormwater,
Mm-hmm.
because the planning board is acting as the stormwater permit granting authority.
Right.
So I just wouldn't want you guys to get too wordy such that there's a conflict between the two documents. So just,
Well, hopefully, we both have the same consultant, and they ought to
Yeah.
be able to figure out how to make them work. And we don't want them to be a conflict, and I don't imagine, and we've said this from the get-go, that the planning board is dealing primarily with that. I mean, our input was more vegetation and how it would support the wetlands and things like that has been our input on this. So I'm not gonna write,
I'm just suggesting that it might be a good idea to look at the planning board's conditions.
Yeah.
As you're kind of going through that process in your mind, that's all.
okay.
Right, in our order of conditions for projects like this, we have standard stormwater conditions, because stormwater was triggered under the Wetlands Protection Act, so
Mhm.
Even the
I
standard.
mean, we have a standard set,
Yep.
which I think would be agreeable.
Yeah, but even the
You know.
standard.
Well, we want to get those and make sure, because, I mean, literally, their stormwater stuff is exhaustive. And what I'm saying is, I don't want a standard,
Right, you don't want conflicting
Generalization.
orders, right? We totally get it. You don't want, that doesn't help any of us.
right.
Yeah, more
Okay.
so than
Yeah.
what we've got, I'm sure.
Oh,
All right.
yeah.
So I'll work, yeah, you know, I'll talk to you about those conditions.
Anything else?
Amy and I will be in.
Anything else?
Okay.
All right?
I mean, they listed some other stuff, but I don't see
Yeah.
any sense in going through it until we see the draft,
All right.
you know?
Yep.
All right, why don't you guys go out and see how much junk is in the marsh?
Will.
Can we bring it up to Clap Road?
No, bring it to the
Oh,
next
to the
meeting.
old dump? The old dump?
No, that's a school bus turnaround.
I know, but it was an old dump.
All right.
We used to do dump picking over there.
Need a motion to move this, to continue this to May 7th?
Are we ready?
You have a second?
I just made it.
Well,
Now it's seconded.
I got a
Okay.
second. All
All
in
in
favor?
favor?
yes, we are ready.
Aye.
Yeah, 6:20?
Which is
6:20.
business.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. We're getting stalled there.
You know what, I realized I did jump over that RDA. Do we want to do that, or wait?
Yeah, if you want to do that real quick.
Is somebody here for Libertine Realty Trust?
Yes.
So,
Mark McLaughlin, I'm
Hi, Mark.
representing the Libertine family in this case.
okay.
Second,
You
Mark.
just read this on April 23rd, 2018, during the 6:15 meeting at the Town Hall, the Scituate Conservation Commission will act on the request of Libertine Realty Trust for determination of applicability to the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Scituate Wetlands bylaws to replace 3 concrete footings with 3 driven piles to support an existing deck on property located at 240 Central Ave, Humrock. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. Go ahead.
Yeah, the premise was that during the March storm, the deck fell down due to undermining of the footings. And at this point, we would like to take the opportunity to replace them with driven piles to prevent future problems. That's simply, basically, and then the deck's gonna be repaired and reinstalled on top of the new footings. It gives us the opportunity to drive piles till the deck has been moved
Sure.
by the storm.
So the deck's not there right now, or?
It's on the property, it just has to be reassembled and put back onto its,
It's on.
Onto the
Question
new
of what-
pilings.
it's a question of whether it goes back on pilings or it goes back on top of its footings.
Okay.
And we would prefer to do the pilings.
There's only 3, right?
3 pilings instead of, currently there's 5 footings
Yeah,
because they're simply precast concrete footings.
okay.
But 3 driven piles will satisfy the
You wanna see this?
strength requirements. They
Um,
will literally replace like piles 1, 3, footings 1, 3, and 5.
Sure.
Will be replaced by.
Right.
Okay. Penny?
I don't have any problem with it.
I don't either.
Looks good.
Lisa?
Makes sense.
Jen? Amy, any thoughts?
No, I mean, it's a tough site, tough area, I did hard by the winter storms. So this would be the administratively way to handle it.
Okay.
So I would recommend a negative.
3?
Anybody in the audience with this? Okay. When, to drive these, Mark, do you know that you've got clear going, once you start that? Are you gonna have to do any more excavating?
No, they're just,
I mean, no, you don't think there's any other foundation underneath it?
no, this is between the houses. The only things that ever been there have been decks, and the storm actually excavated enough material that you know that there was nothing there.
Okay.
So we're going to use the vibratory system of putting piles in and then hammer them off.
Great. Okay.
I make a motion for a -3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good to go. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
About 3 tomorrow.
Frank, can I just do the continued ones?
Sure.
Okay, I make a motion to continue Gardner to May 7th at 6:20.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I make a motion to continue 31 Common Street to May 7th at 6:20.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I make a motion to continue 62 Glades Road to May 7th at 6:20.
Second.
And, so that's it, right?
Yep.
Okay.
All in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks. Keep the wheels moving. So we have Town of Scituate, DPW Bailey's Causeway, replace culvert. Good evening. And this is continued from we opened this a while ago.
Right. I'm Bruce Adams with Weston and Sampson Engineers.
So we're doing Bailey's first.
So I can present both culverts simultaneously or separately, they're both similar, your choice.
I'm fine with them being together.
Me too.
Um,
Yeah.
So there's, we're also doing
Gilson Road.
Yeah.
DPW Gilson Road.
Do you want to look at these, Frank?
Feel free to move up if you're interested in the project.
Right on here.
Oh, you drew a little bit of a crowd.
Yeah, I thought I'd just be alone, which I usually am. Okay, again,
Go ahead.
my name is Bruce Adams, I'm with Weston and Sampson Engineers, and I can walk through the project for you and explain what's happening, if
Sure.
that makes sense, okay. So we have 2 culverts, one on Gilson Road, one on Bailey's Causeway. They're both corrugated metal steel structures, and they're both have deteriorated, so they're, you might call them functionally obsolete, structurally obsolete. And the intent is to replace those with concrete structures, more or less in the same location. The project is driven by a desire to improve the salt marsh habitat that is currently somewhat degraded by the ability of those culverts to pass water at a rate that would really essentially allow free flow of water. So the specifics of the project and the way it will be built is that both roads would be closed for the duration of the work, which would last several months. The area immediately upstream and downstream of the culvert would be cofferdammed, either through sheet piling or a lot of contractors using those large bags of gravel material to create essentially a temporary dam. The extent of those is minimal, really several feet just beyond the end of the culvert, so that the impacts to the salt marsh habitat are minimal. So again, those cofferdams upstream and downstream, and then just outside of that would be a silt curtain, and that curtain would prevent any leakage that might go through the cofferdam from sediments getting into the waterways. During the course of the work, there would be a temporary pipe which would be laid parallel with the culverts at the same invert or elevation, and that would pass water upstream, downstream as the tides go in and out. The culverts are both sized at 3 feet tall by 6 feet wide, and that's an optimized design. The intent is to make it large enough to pass water in order to get a good flushing of the upstream habitat. It's also, the height is restricted by the utilities underneath. There's a gravity sewer under one of the culverts and a water main under one of them also, and there'll be a conduit for a future water main potentially under one of them. So again, the culverts are 3 by 6 feet, so the contractor, the first thing would do after closing the road, they'll excavate the pavement out, they'll excavate the soil, remove the existing culvert, widen that area, set down, crush down, and compact that in place, then set the precast concrete units, which include the culvert itself and the precast concrete wing walls. And then they would backfill the area, compact the soil, and then repave. Once everything is established and Conservation Commission allows, then the silt curtain and the cofferdam would be removed, and the temporary pipe also removed. One aspect I should mention of the temporary pipe, that really has the most direct impact on the salt marsh habitat. So when that's being done, it's important that the vegetation as well as the soils be taken out and stored essentially so they can be put back in the same strata and also be kept watered so that they don't die. The intent is when everything is said and done that really no net permanent impact to the habitat and an improved ecosystem. I think that covers most of the issues. If there's anything specifically that you'd...
Okay. Penny?
So basically, both of these, I know the one on Gilson is the nightmare one, Bailey's Causeway. It's just old, it needs to be replaced.
And small.
It's small.
Yeah.
Very small. Yeah, that's correct. They're both metal. One is essentially more or less a pipe, and the other is what we call an arch. Bailey's Causeway is slightly larger. It does pass some flows. But Gilson's, the new culvert will pass a lot more water, so it'll allow the flushing of the upriver or upstream area much more effectively.
So these will be done simultaneously or one after the other?
That hasn't been decided, so I don't have a good answer to that. Well, I should say that there are reasons to do them together, that is the contractor efficiencies and cost, but there's also reasons not to do them separately, which is impact to residents in the area. So also, time of season is important.
That was the next question.
Due to fish runs, yeah. The intent is to do these in late fall and into the winter. Right.
So, because you have Glades Road is one way in the summer.
Okay.
So, and public safety is really, I think, the big driver in determining when they're done and whether they're concurrent.
Good to know.
Paul?
No questions.
Lisa?
No questions.
Jen? Amy, your thoughts?
Yeah, so,
We'll get there.
so anyways, obviously, these projects are both big improvements over existing conditions and should solve some of the big drainage problems that we're having in those areas. You know, I think that it's been a long time coming. I mean, it's been well vetted, the project. Over a year ago, state agencies, including this office, they've all convened out there to try to come up with a solution for the drainage and we're in agreement this would be a good start. We were hopeful that bigger ecological restoration project was going to be performed as part of this culvert replacement, but that part of the project will be a second phase that we're looking for solutions on try to deal with dredging on channels that may have filled in with overwash, even worsened in this past winter. But anyway, so we do see it as a big improvement on the salt marsh habitat. Questions about whether or not the culverts will drain fast enough to really improve conditions. Certainly it will be an improvement over what's there. You know, I guess I've got a question on how do you prove that it's going to drain fast enough? Like what types of flows were considered? The interest of the Wetlands Protection Act that we've identified that we're interested in would be storm damage prevention, flood control, and habitat loss. DEP commented about stream crossing standards and whether or not the project had met crossing standards with the newest guidance. And we had discussed possible peer review just to do an overview of the flow data. But, you know, I think that DPW and Weston Sampson are feeling that their data is supportive with their modeling, so leave that up to you to discuss.
I can address the hydraulic issues
Sure.
if you'd like. The latest chart up here, if you look on the bottom, we performed the hydraulic analyses on both culverts to understand how fast the water would move into and out of the, call it the impoundment upstream. And if you look at the charts, they're actually the up and down waves. Those are tidal cycles. And what we do is model the water in and the restriction of the culvert and then the flow out. And what we do is we look at the ability to move that water and the elevation difference, because if you have a restricted pipe, you'll have water back up, as you know, on either side during the incoming and outgoing tides. Bailey's Causeway, which is actually under Gilson Road on the left-hand side, fairly well tracks the tidal cycle. There's really not much of a restriction there, provided the culvert is open and it's not blocked by debris. Gilson Road, on the other hand, there's a lag that basically acts as a dam, and then the water, you know, as the tide goes all the way out, the water eventually catches up and goes out, and then as tide comes back in, it creates a dam, and it does go back through. What we show in the hydraulic analyses is by changing that very small culvert pipe to a 3x6 opening, that essentially creates only a few inches of differential between the upstream and downstream side of the culvert. So there'll be a much faster movement of water, and it'll essentially track the tides on the ocean side of the culvert. So that's so we did perform those analyses and showed that there's very, very good tracking of that. And that's how we optimize the 3x6 foot culvert size. Sometimes you like to make those bigger, but if we made it taller, it's essentially, you know, there's not enough road over it. And if we make it wider, it's not structurally sound. So the 3x6 was the optimum size.
Maybe we should open it up to the audience and then go from there. Let me work this way. Yes, sir. You want to state your name and address?
My name's Bob Kennedy, 34 Foxwell Lane. I was wondering why, a couple of questions really, why do you have to wait till the fall to start it? Maybe you said, and I didn't hear you, why can't you start it right now? And I was wondering, where's it gonna empty into the culvert? I live on the corner of Foxwell and Hughes, and I get flooded all the time. And what the culvert is gonna do to help me, I'd like to know. And I'd like to know if there's any way they could raise Gilson Road so the ocean doesn't come over that. Because the ocean comes, you know, the culvert's fine, but the ocean, the tide's higher, so the ocean's gonna come right over it. You know, so what is the culvert gonna do? I mean, I've been flooded over and over and over again. And, you know, and I'm not getting any younger, it's a lot of work for me to do.
Sure.
And, you know, I've had floors put in downstairs, cost me $2,000 for each time the floors get ruined. You know, I was wondering what kind of alternatives. I mean, I've lived here for 47 years, and I haven't had for anything, so.
Right. So my understanding was, in talking with the DPW, and I'll let engineer come back to it, but in both cases with Bailey's Causeway and Gilson Road, the roads are relatively low. And so our concern was, in making these culverts larger, would there actually be increased flooding further inland? You know, you're gonna have a larger culvert. Now, you know, that water is held up, almost the road becomes a dam, and then that water would be held back and not flood inland pieces more. But what really happens there in the case of when we have severe tides, the roads get overtopped fairly easily. And so to put the larger culvert there actually means that that water can drain out after a storm event. Plus, what the real concern is for us, that we got salt water moving further up into these back areas, which is good for mosquito control. It helps control Phragmites. It has a more natural flow of water before the roads were ever built in the first place. So we're looking for all those pieces. I don't believe this is a flood program. This isn't designed to stop any flooding that would occur back in these areas. There's no baffles, there's no anything here to say stop additional water from flowing in. It's simply a matter of allowing that water to flow more freely. When the area does flow, it's not going to take as long to drain out. So hopefully get back to normal on the other side. But these are not being designed to restrict the flow going further inland. And if you think about it, by doing what you're asking, or you're suggesting that if the road gets elevated and that holds that back, they're not that effective, and you're going to wind up flooding the folks that are getting flooded that much quicker. I mean, there's a pretty big area, it's a huge basin, the water comes into all that area. Most engineers would tell you that adding some fill on one side or the other would make no difference because it's such a vast area, so it doesn't really change it. But they're not, the plan of this isn't to try to control flooding on the other side of Gilson Road. It's simply a matter of trying to let that water move more freely in both directions. So it's not a it's not a fix-all. Yes, ma'am.
Make any difference? I mean, just the water will go quicker, that's all? It will come in the same way?
Essentially, it'll just,
It'll
if you watch the tidal cycle on the ocean side, you'll see that pretty much on the upstream side of the culvert.
Hi, I'm a newcomer here.
Sure.
Wife.
And your name?
Rose.
Okay, Rose.
A relation.
Yeah.
Anyway, we, years ago, when we first moved here, when I first came in the 20s, there was some kind of opening on the other side of Hughes Road. So it drained into the marsh across the street, going towards the golf course. And so we didn't have flood for many years. That is all overgrown and closed up now. So as a result, that opening is closed. You can't go through underneath the road like it was and drain into the other field, the other marsh. So I'm just curious why that can't happen again, why they can just open that up and let it drain normally into an area that's already marsh. It's not all homes or anything. It's already wetland.
Right. Have you guys looked at that on the other side? I mean, I know that doesn't happen at Bailey's Causeway.
Yeah, that's the first I've heard of that situation, so, no, we haven't looked at it.
It does continue through. The pipe
Sure.
continues through and it empties into the golf course.
Yep.
And it's a big.
No, I know where you are. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and it doesn't hurt anyone.
Right.
Coyotes are too.
Sure.
And it probably goes another 40 or 50 feet beyond the road.
Right. I mean, it's a big saddle right there, and a real bad storm, it floods right through, and it even goes over Old Driftway.
Right.
We got 2 feet now.
Yeah.
Tell 'em.
The Bartons were customers of mine years ago. We rescued his horse out of his barn in the blizzard of '78, so, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So,
And your name?
my name's Amelie Loyat, 26 Gilson Road.
Okay.
And totally understand, of course, we're gonna be concerned about flooding because we're getting affected. I think the biggest reason we're getting affected in our neck of the woods is because it comes in, it has no way to get out, and it just stacks up and stacks up. So that's why we're asking all the questions about the culvert, and we're so thankful. We're so thankful. I did bring some pictures, just some concerns, and I don't know how exactly to share this, but a lot of these were taken today. How do I do this over here? This is Gilson Road, right where the culvert is on the Peggotty Beach side. This is how much debris is there today.
Sure.
This is how many months after the storm, This right here is where the culvert is. This is how much is stacked up. It's really bad, guys. And every ship shape day, me and all my neighbors, we go in there and we try to we're lifting logs over our shoulders,
Yep.
It's hard. This is how small the culvert is right now on our backside.
Yeah.
It was a pipe that I think used to be about this big. It is crushed down to here. It's tiny now. My old neighbor, so I've lived at 26 Gilson for 16 years now. Been raising this issue with the town that whole time. My previous neighbor was there many years before me, and he told me he was asking for 10 years prior. I took this picture today of the algae and the grossness that's growing in our marsh, and mosquitoes and everything. This again was today. It's like stagnant.
It's worse and
and-
worse every year because
So
it
just,
Yeah, and I'm sorry to share this, but this has been building up and I gotta share. This is from the other side of the marsh. This used to be normal salt marsh, and because the water stacked up so much and the ice packed on top of it, it all sunk. So now it's like lake and pond. This was my backyard. I've never seen this in 16 years. This was my backyard this year.
sure.
And this was my backyard in the funnest storm. That was my chicken coop that's half underwater.
You still have what?
And literally 16 years, we never had water in our backyard. It filled my entire backyard.
There's been water back there before. Maybe not in your 16 years, but
Yeah, no, I'm sure there has, but our house, we go back through the records, we bought the house, and it showed water in our basement, but never anywhere else. So I just kind of wanted to share these pictures.
Thank you.
How bad it was. I do have follow-up questions, but I shared enough for now, so
okay.
I'll let other people ask questions.
Yes, sir.
Feeney, 20 Foxwell Lane. Just to the question over here, why wait till the fall?
So part of the process will be a permitting process. And just like anything in a marsh, there's times when we have to look at it from an ecological standpoint. So that'll be part of the recommendations from them. There'll be a whole bunch of permitting bodies that do this, not just us.
Is there a way to fast track it? Because all I can think of is, as they put the coffer dams in, we're gonna have a nor'easter, and they're gonna get washed away, and then the road's gonna disappear. And we have more than a culvert to deal with, we've got a whole washout to deal with.
Sure.
So the quicker this gets started, fewer, less damage.
Yeah. Let's let the engineer,
The seasonality has to do with the habitat, in case there are fish runs, and the other issue is there are other permitting agencies, there's the Army Corps that weighs in, Chapter 91 license, 401 water quality certification. Those permits are in process and they take several months.
Yeah.
So we probably won't hear for a few months on those. Which is the intent, is to get those permits through, get everything's all set, and then start in the fall. And also seasonally, there's less traffic and less disruption, both due to noise as well as traffic. So
but
it's,
I understand your point that obviously you don't want to be doing this during the middle of a storm
Yeah.
event, and by having the road closed for the duration of this project should speed it up as opposed to trying to do half of it.
I can't speak for everybody else, but I could care less if the road is closed for the construction, but if during construction more damage is done and the road damage becomes much greater than the width of the culvert, then it's a totally different
Sure.
issue.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Ted Kent, and I live at 24 Foxwell Lane. Just as a point, a year and a half ago, the Plymouth County mosquito control had come into our marsh, which is all of our backyards. And he was there for like a day or a day and a half, and he did dig out some of the trenches. And he had said, and this was unsolicited, but he said to me, "This is the worst saltwater marsh I have ever seen in my life." The worst. And if we're concerned about, the welfare of the marsh and protection of marshlands and the ecology and all this kind of stuff, the sooner we get this done, the sooner you're accomplishing your mission.
Sure.
Completely agree.
Because the marsh it's deteriorating, and whatever's there for marsh life is probably gone or on the way.
Dead.
Right.
Yeah, and so, that's part of your commission,
So,
to protect that.
and some of the problems, we had a meeting, was last week or so, with DEP, CZM, discussing the drainage in between Kent Street and Townway area, because we know all that overwash from Peggotty Beach filled a lot of the creeks that drain that. So there's that connectivity between the harbor and Gilson Road, and we know that there's a whole series of creeks that have to drain to get that water out of there. And a lot of those creeks were filled with that overwash, and the town has dug some out. We also talked about, Plymouth County Mosquito Control has like an ongoing permit to do this trenching. And one of the discussions we had was, could we talk with them and see if they could improve the trenches that are on that side of the road so that water flow will actually help? Because
I think what people are missing is that it's all one great, it's all connected.
we get it. We get it, and at one time.
Our backyards
Yeah.
are the overflow for Peggotty Beach.
Right. And before Gilson Road was built, or Bailey's Causeway, that was just a continuous marsh that's been restricted by these pipes. And so that's the reason for this construction, and why this commission would see something like this as being favorable.
We just feel like it's being, it's the end of it. It's the very end of the line.
Right.
We feel like we're just getting ignored, and they're taking care of the area right, close to Peggotty Beach and all that, because they had a back.
Well, they gotta start somewhere. They gotta get, if the water can't get back up to Gilson Road, then all this other work isn't gonna matter. So there's some of the work that they can do with emergency provisions, which is what they're doing. The governor signed a declaration after the storm allowing work to be done without all the permitting that's involved with some of this, and that's how the DPW was undertaking some of that work.
And Rosemary brought up a good point, because at Hughes Road, there's a continuation of that marsh, which has been over.
Sure.
No one's looked at that.
We also, this number of years ago, we were dealing with a similar issue at Musquashkett Pond. They had tried to do, keep the pond elevated, and it was blocked off, and then there wasn't the exchange of water through the tides. And we found the same thing happening that's in those photos, that the water became stagnant. There were invasives that were growing that the salt water could help eliminate. So we're very much in favor of getting this done. We understand your frustration with some of this. We're not trying to be an obstacle. We want to make sure that it's done in an environmentally safe way. Part of the problem that's still going to exist, even after this is done, is it is a large area, and over time, there's a buildup of marsh grass, reeds, and unfortunately debris and other things that get in there, and when a big storm like this hits, it moves everything right back to there. The good news is, having an opening like this, hopefully the DPW could get a machine in there and remove some of that material relatively quickly so that that water could flow again. Yes, ma'am.
Jessica McGuire, Foxwell Lane. She said that phase 2 would be the dredging. I was wondering have you guys thought about maybe doing that phase first during the summer and then doing the culvert in the fall?
Yes, please.
So that there is area for, because I think part of Tom's problem is the water's building up and pushing into his yard because it has nowhere to go. The channels are all filled up.
So the permitting process to get some of that done is difficult. When you're,
But if we could get mosquito control to do that under those permits over the summer and get it prepped so that when the culvert goes in,
yeah.
the ball is rolling.
Because mosquito control 2 years ago,
Came and started.
they came, they started I watched them one day, they were there, then they stopped for like a month.
And left the machine in the middle of
And
the
they
marsh.
left the machine in the middle of the marsh. I called, they said one of their workers got sick, and then they never came back. So like, can't they just come back?
Well, we don't dictate what Plymouth County, we can ask them to do that. You know, we can even talk to see if they'll help with some of that. We've already had this,
But if
part
you're
of this
permitting
discussion.
the dredge on the other side, which you guys are doing by Peggotty, does that permitting go along the whole length of that channel?
That channel was filled by the storm.
Yeah, these have been filled by a storm because it's
So
all
was
washed
Peggotty.
in there.
The storm, the channels that were cleared out were filled with cobble overwash from the storm. And that's the part that the DPW has taken on to open up some of those
But
channels.
all this debris that's in front, that's all from a storm. When would
Yeah,
that be
like I don't
removed for the
understand
culvert?
the.
Well, that, again, that's, the DPW, you could ask them if they can remove some of it. To your point, you know, during Ship Shape Day, trash and stuff is removed, but it all takes time. So I'd certainly be encouraged, not to pass the buck, but certainly asking DPW to remove some of this stuff to at least get some water movement is reasonable.
But as conservation, couldn't you contact Plymouth County Mosquito Control and put in a request now for them?
We had that discussion, and we're gonna be talking with DPW and CZM and whatnot to see. I think that the engineer pointed out, there's a bunch of different groups that all look at this. It's not, unfortunately, just one, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's not just one entity that looks at this. There's a lot of them. And so they are all trying to work together. It's not synchronized, unfortunately.
Hi,
Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer Stockbridge, 25 Gilson. I have been in touch with DPW, Sean McCarthy, often. I saw him today, actually. I spoke to him about the possibility of maybe putting more storm drains on Gilson Road, which would be similar to your elevating the road idea, and then at least allowing some of the water to have a place to drain. He said drains are easy to install, actually. But I'm wondering if maybe you could also contact him and because I've been asking about getting that culvert area cleaned out, because it seems like it's clogged up with debris.
We can certainly, we're having a discussion with them. This is a DPW project, so the engineer can certainly get that feedback back to him as well.
Definitely.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Elizabeth Blanchard, 14 Potterville Lane. We're just wondering, with all this permitting that you're talking about, that has to be in place and will take place in November. The permitting is there, but do we have the funds and the money to do it right then and there? When, I mean, is the money allocated? Is the money there? We're talking about permit, but I mean,
Yeah,
is the money to do?
my understanding is that there was a town meeting appropriation about a year ago
I think so.
for the projects. So I believe
I
that's
mean,
in
I was
place.
told that last
Oh.
July we had money.
So when they vote, typically what the town does is, rather than, they used to just vote to do the design. And now what they're doing, a lot of these projects, is they're voting to design and construct, so that way we don't have a bunch of
Waiting.
Designs and no.
designs and no
projects.
funding. So my understanding is that both are in place. At town meeting, it was voted to do that. It goes out to bid, they give it to an engineer, the engineer has to look at, or the firms, they bid on it, they select an engineering firm, in this case Weston and Sampson. They have to look at the marsh, all these pieces, and then start the permitting process to actually do the construction. And I know it's frustrating. If you think this takes a long time, ask Penny how long it took to remove the Hunter's Pond Dam in North Scituate.
7 years.
Yeah, I've been calling for 3 years.
Yeah. So the town understands it's a problem. They can see that. It's certainly, the severity of it was obviously brought to light by this storm, as was a lot of situations. They're trying to move to get some of that going. And again, this is going to be twofold. This culvert is going to allow water out once it all comes in. When a storm event happens, water will move more rapidly in and out, which is good in a lot of ways. It's going to be good just on an ongoing basis, that salt water starts to work its way up into that area and eliminates that algae, and the salt water helps control mosquitoes. That's why they do all the trenching. And we've been talking, hopefully we'll keep that moving, that additional trenching will get done between Gilson Road and the harbor, so that maybe in the future, these storms aren't going to cover that, depending on the severity of the overwash. Maybe there'll be some new trenches further towards Kent Street, so that when that overwash happens, it doesn't clog them up.
We need those now, we can't wait for, I know, I'm sorry, but, behind Peggotty has had the trenches worked out.
The only thing I can tell you is that we've had people go into places well-intended to just start to excavate after a storm, that aren't thinking about the environment, they're not thinking about how to do this, they're not doing the work correctly, and then they do damage to the marshes and things, which in the end is far worse than what happened. So there's try to measure all that when we deal with these pieces.
Frank, is it in the plans that this culvert goes over Hughes into the golf course?
I don't believe there's anything on the culvert that's from Hughes to, right now, there's nothing in this. This is strictly a culvert. One of them's at Bailey's Causeway, and one of them's on Gilson Road.
But that's the one from Gilson, that goes over Gilson to Hughes into the golf course.
But I don't believe there's anything to deal with that pipe that you're talking about that goes from Hughes into the golf course.
So what happens when it gets to Hughes?
It goes into our basement.
I mean, why, when it goes through into the golf course?
Yeah, well, I think that's something to get back to and have them take a look and see if there's,
Because that's all marshally in there.
I understand. When it floods up high enough, it's actually coming from the North River, that estuary, coming back the other way.
Yeah, sorry. How can it come in there? It's pretty high up.
Well, it does.
The cliff's there. How can it do that? From the
And
North
that
River
low
down.
saddle where the sewage treatment plant is,
That never affects us at all.
no. It floods in. I had a house on Old Driftway, And that marsh, in a real bad storm, floods back into there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of dead ends at Hughes Road, I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole marsh is gonna flood.
Sure.
Just as a point of interest, who spearheads this? Who was the point of contact? DPW?
DPW.
Yeah.
Or you people?
No, we're a permitting
We just permit.
entity, just as there will be the Army Corps of Engineers and different agencies. We've encouraged this to happen because we know environmentally it's better for the marshes to have that flow, so.
We should really bitch at DPW then.
Well, go talk to
Pardon
them.
my
Yeah,
language.
I apologize, I never said that, yeah, we were hired by the Department of Public Works to do
Okay.
this project.
All
So
right.
we're working for DPW.
Yeah, and Mr. McCarthy is a really good advocate for all of this as well. I know he is. He's a hardworking guy in that.
In Bailey's Causeway, I'm not familiar with that culvert because one is enough for me. But does their culvert affect homeowners as bad as it affects our area?
I don't.
Should we be first? Thank you. It's a very good point.
We
We're
can,
on people
we
that-
can do that.
Yeah.
It does sound
I
like
don't
that.
think they are.
Yeah, just, and to go back to schedule, typically the way the contractors like to do these is to do them in series, but where they overlap, so that they get the best efficiency of their work crews. So it's certainly doing Gilson Road, I agree with that. Should be done first.
Yes, ma'am.
But from what I understand, from what you said earlier, it doesn't necessarily, doing the culvert project isn't going to necessarily help with the flooding. It's going to,
It's not
is
a
that
flooding
correct?
It's
issue.
not flooding.
It's a health of the marsh issue.
Right, okay. All right, I just want to make sure I was clear.
And believe me, there's just so many issues in town with how a lot of that's going to get dealt with, and how are they going to elevate certain areas? And believe me, when you sit down and talk to the different entities that control that, it gets very frustrating. Because nobody likes to see people's homes get damaged, but how they affect those things, how the stone can be moved, who's got jurisdiction, can give you a bad headache, yeah. I think maybe if you could get back to Sean and ask him about that other culvert
Yeah, I
as
will,
well.
definitely.
Because that may be something as simple as clearing out something that's already there.
The water would have somewhere to go then. It would go into the golf course.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
Well, I don't think they want it either. I know. Okay.
Conservation wise, though, I'm sorry to circle back on this, but
Yeah.
the mosquito control. I'm really, the marsh is right behind my house. It
Sure.
looks awful.
Yep.
What can we do with mosquito control or what have you? Can we put in a call and make a request now?
Sure.
For trenching, you know?
Yep.
Um,
You know what? Squeaky wheel gets the grease. I'd be calling them.
that's what I'm trying to be right now.
Yeah.
So,
They used to do
yeah.
that every 3 or 4 years. when I
Right.
first moved here.
Yep.
Everybody cleaning fingers all the time.
Yep. No, and we saw the same thing last, I mean, I don't know how all these operations run, and, last year they had a machine in the marshes off in North Situate, and it was parked there for a good amount of time. So,
We just can't have it anymore, because it's dying, it's dead. The Phragmites everywhere, it's algae and mosquito central.
The other thing is, just in fairness, it's kind of specialized equipment. I mean, regular machines can't go over that marsh, they'd be sunk up to their cab.
Oh, yeah, no,
So
that's
they need
exactly
to
why
have
I'm asking
machines
about
that
mosquito
have really wide tracks and somebody that knows how to do that, so.
Yeah, I mean, mosquito control has the ability to go in without a permit. They can go in and they can, just notification and clean out existing, throughways. And we'd like to talk to them about, potentially forming a more direct route in one location, but those are kind of like ongoing studies that the town is doing to improve the area. But in the meantime, I would certainly encourage contacting them. The town is also contacting them in support, you know what I mean? So if you have a name, you want to let us know who you're calling, however we can get the job done. Because it,
So if all of us call?
yeah, and, you know,
Everyone.
that might increase the
You gotta
chances
do
of
this.
getting them out there. Because short of mosquito control doing it, then we're looking at another notice of intent for the second phase, which would involve other permitting agencies like CDM and for an ecological restoration NOI. And so that would be a more lengthy process. So definitely mosquito control, if we can get them out there, and you've had them out there before, that would be the way to go.
So everybody call.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
All right. Any other questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'm just waiting for you
You're
to
our
say
hero.
okay. Can I
Sorry this
close?
went longer than you
I make a
probably
motion to close.
No.
No, I'm not so sure you want to close, though.
Why?
We're waiting for
What
other.
are we waiting for?
We're waiting for the Hughes Road, with
Well, no, but we.
That's not part of this, yeah.
But my
What?
understanding is we're waiting for other agencies to weigh in,
No.
comment. That's what I.
No, he's got filings with them, but
Yeah,
we
they're-
can approve our
Yeah,
piece.
they shouldn't impact the, I will say, there's only one comment that did come back from the Army Corps of Engineers, and that was on the invert elevation of the culvert.
Okay.
The freshwater regulations want you to put soil in the bottom for habitat. Saltwater, they generally don't, so they suggested that we raise the bottom of the culvert so that it would wash clear. That just changes the elevation a little bit. It actually makes it less detrimental to the, because they're not digging as deep. But that's,
If we close, we
but-
can't accept any more.
yeah, I don't,
So that's,
Oh.
I mean, I would like to close if we can, but it limits us. And it would.
Except that if the change were minor, we could just amend the order.
Yeah.
Um,
Or not amend the order, but we can accept a revised plan.
mhm,
yeah,
Right.
I'd suggest that if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, so we could close it pending comment.
I
Well,
would just close it.
You will.
Just close it and let those agencies do their job.
You'll get all those,
yeah,
and then we'll
that's-
come back if we need to, and
Yeah,
It's in their wheelhouse, yeah.
Okay.
I make a motion to close Bailey's Causeway culvert replacement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I make a motion to close the Gilson Road replace culvert.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right, I would keep up your vocal.
To the mosquito
Sorry, we're
people.
vocal.
Well, no, but this is, whether it's yours with this type of flooding, whether it's overwash at Man Hill Beach, I mean, everybody's along the water's been impacted by this in one way or the other, and they'd all like to see some action.
It's not the flooding, it's the health of it.
Sure.
It looks awful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, good luck.
Good night.
What's that? Yeah.
Where are we?
53 Border?
53.
Diamond Development, 53 Border Street.
This is what's on the table.
There's no information, I think.
Yeah, they know it.
You'll let Sean know about that?
definitely, I'll
That's
be in touch tomorrow.
interesting.
Yeah.
Talk to him frequently.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like you do.
Right.
You're good at that.
What's that?
Just so that you know, when you watch these on TV, her microphone, you can't hear what she says.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, she should put the microphone up near where she is.
You want to read them?
Oh, Tory's Lane, yes, I did, yes, I did. I'm sorry, I ought to, yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
Let's go, folks.
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
5 minute break.
Amy? Why don't you, if you go out in the hall and grab that engineer, you might be able to get a couple of quick. Amy, if you want to spin your mic around too a little bit, that, your mic is going into the wall. It's probably deliberate.
When you watch it on TV, you can't hear any of your comments. So the mic,
That's not
she's like,
true.
she's
I
saying,
hear
yeah, good.
her.
Very quiet.
I hear her.
Penny's microphone's up.
I know,
Because I've got a
she's
big
loud.
voice.
Yeah, that's true.
She's loud.
You
All right.
can hear me next door.
So,
What's new?
what's new?
Steve Bjorklund, for the record, 53 Border Street. We were waiting for the Zoning Board of Appeals to act on their special permit for the house. And last Thursday, we opened the hearing, closed the hearing, and got the approval. And I think Amy talked to the building inspector Friday morning. So I think she can verify that.
Okay. Amy, do you want to lead off on this for Border Street?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that I really have much to say. I think I've weighed in probably, how many hearings have we had on this one now? 4
Yep.
times. So I don't have anything new. I can repeat what I've said before if you want me to.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, they had the ZBA hearing last Thursday.
So planning's gonna do stormwater? Did I read that? They're planning?
No, I don't
If
believe
it's-
anything came up about the stormwater. Well, Steve, you were there, but
Yeah, we just discussed the stormwater process when we were there. And again, when we go for a building permit, if they deem that we have to get a stormwater permit at that time, we'll get a stormwater permit prior to the issuance of a building permit, but we believe we're under the thresholds. But it would be a planning board requirement to get the stormwater permit.
Okay. I don't know, I go back to, it's a toss-up, Steve, in my mind. You know, I'd like not to see any more disturbance on the property. I personally would like it to go where the existing building is and not all the fill brought in. But it's, you know, I'm weighing it because you are getting the house back farther in the new area. So they both have the pros and cons and positive, and so I'm kind of just in a quandary with the project. But that's me personally.
I am absolutely in a quandary. I think this could be setting a very bad precedent by not using the existing footprint. There are some things that have been stated that just, I know from being there, aren't true. I mean, it's not a concrete slab. There is space under the house. That's really irrelevant. I'm really having a problem with the idea of not using the existing footprint. So at this moment, I'm not good on it.
Well,
I think it's a tough property for the reasons everyone said. You can argue detriments and benefits both ways. I do think it wouldn't be unusual for us, though, had you, as I said before, if they came in proposing to build a house on the bank, I could see people here right out of the box saying, can you move it further away from the resource area? So to me, I don't think that's more detrimental than building right where it's at.
okay. Lisa?
Either way, there's pros and cons on disturbances and not. And it's almost like a coin toss. Well, if you do it this way, that happens. If you do it that way, that happens. So, I mean, I just no longer feel strongly against like I used to. It just, oh.
Steve, do you have the plan there? Can you put it up?
It's just a tough one.
Yeah, and I appreciate all of the comments that the board has as well. And I think what it boils down to is mitigation if we're doing work in that area. And if the board wants me to propose more mitigation, that's one thing. But
we drove the design of the project around, moving this thing further up the hill and doing all that, and, trying to reduce, some of the fill and stuff like that. Personally, I think we have a good project. I think it's gonna be an asset overall. And I think it does give us the ability to have all the mitigation along the top of where the coastal bank is, which is what we attempted to do.
Additional mitigation would be helpful.
Jen?
I really echo Rich's statement around just kind of further projects or future projects and how that might set a standard for it. So I would agree with what he said. There was also, I feel like, some notes that I'm not sure if it's been changed around like the limit of work being a little conservative at spots. So maybe if that was a little bit more realistic, I might feel differently about it.
As far as,
It just felt
What
really
limit?
tight to some of the proposed structures.
as far as where the grading is, you mean?
Amy, you brought this up before, the line of work.
The limit of.
The limit of work?
Sorry, wrong word.
That's all right.
Well, the limit of work as far as conservation is concerned is actually lower on the map because of all the mitigation that's in there.
Mhm.
That's different than the limit of work under a stormwater permit, as far as changing grades and things like that are concerned. So it's two apples and oranges, as far as that's concerned. So the actual limit of work is gonna go down towards the top of the coastal bank where you can see all the mitigation in green. So that'll all be revegetated in that area.
The coastal bank is where that
Can I
is.
throw something
Sure.
out? I'll be honest with you. This ain't gonna be lawn, Stephen. That's not gonna be lawn where the house is now, in my estimation. There's gotta be plantings in there. We're disturbing, we're taking trees down, and so forth and so on. So I definitely, in the orders, would not allow all that lawn area. I like all these plantings, but I wouldn't allow all that lawn.
Yeah, and again, I can add additional plantings, that's not a problem. If you're looking for more undisturbed, area in there
Yes,
once it's
yes,
done, or what I call
yeah.
usable area or something like
For the
that.
critters,
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, first of all, I didn't think that there was going to be all that lawn, so that is kind of a surprise to me. I thought it was,
Well, there isn't now.
it was supposed to be natural. So I agree with Penny that it shouldn't be lawn, because at least it'll limit some of the disturbance and therefore replicate the untouched as it was before.
Yeah, the discussion that we had before at the prior meetings revolved around the plantings that were going to be put in the planting beds, whether they were going to be natural or whether they're going to be manicured garden areas. And what Brad Holmes had proposed was to make them naturalized.
Yes.
So, and that's why we proposed that.
And now Penny wants a much more robust planting plan.
Yes.
Yeah. And
That says all lawn,
Mhm.
okay? That's why I went up there. And I just can't.
Steve, I
Yeah,
can't,
like I say, I can increase
Yeah.
that.
I
That's-
can't see it from here, and maybe you're gonna have to flip a plan, but the proposed house with the septic tank and the D-box, is that pumping to that field, or is
The
that,
tanks now are located right in front of the house.
yeah,
It still is going to have to pump to the field, so there's a pump chamber right next to it, but both of those are on the upward side, basically controlled by the foundation of the house, so they'll be
so the
right near the
field
front
is,
door.
the field is higher than the
Yes,
elevation of the house, by how much now?
same as it always was. I mean, I can try and pull, I don't know if I get the septic plan in there. Are you trying to find the elevation of the top of the field?
I guess my point is we're talking, one of the things that's concerning to this project is the amount of fill that's required to do this. And so what you're doing with this house is you're essentially setting the basement floor at a height that makes the basement usable.
Yes.
And then you're building up from there, which essentially is driving how much fill has to be put in the front yard, between the house and the street.
What we're doing is doing a walkout basement so that in the back, there's no fill required in the back.
I understand.
That's why we went with a walkout basement. And in front of the house, this area up in here, no matter where the house goes on the site, that's the septic system, it's the leaching field that's
Typically,
gonna go in
this,
at that elevation.
right, the leaching system is gonna be driven by groundwater and all that sort of thing. So you have a leaching area that has to be at a certain height.
Correct.
If the house itself were lower, the first floor elevation were lower, that means that you might not have a usable basement.
Well, it's still gonna be a usable basement, it's just, it would not be a walkout, it would be a walk-up or something like that.
Okay.
And we're just placing it deeper into the,
Right.
into the ground.
So by doing that, would that reduce the amount of fill that's required?
What happens, and again, what drives this design.
I get it. I mean, I know where the septic is.
Okay, well, what we tried to do, again, to reduce the amount of fill, is to bring the two of these as close as we could together.
Mm-hmm.
So the slab for the foundation can be 10 feet off the soil absorption system. It's like 10 foot and a few inches. The foundation for the house itself has to be 20 feet from the leaching field.
Right.
So short of having a big, huge mound in front of the house, and then sticking the house down the hole, that's why we reduced this and pulled it back up as far as we could. So it reduces the amount of grading that's in this area here. We have heard in meetings that I have 8 feet of fill across the entire lot, okay? On this side over here, we don't change the grade at the property line at all, okay? On this side over here, we change the grade as it goes up against the neighbors, but the neighbors is at a higher elevation than where we are. We're gonna have a retaining wall. Ultimately, we're gonna work with this neighbor to try to remove the wall and blend into his property. So you're not gonna notice that. It's actually gonna make his property better. It makes his stormwater work better, because right now, he has an extreme drop-off right at the back of his property. For those who've been out there, they've seen it. So we're gonna be able to eliminate that, or reduce it, not eliminate it, but reduce it in this area right here. So, I mean, the top of the leaching field is elevation 35, and the first floor of the house is at 34. So it does drop down from the septic system somewhat, which is why we're still pumping it. So we have reduced that height or that amount of fill by bringing the house down that much. But obviously, we don't want to have the house look like it's in a hole. So we're hoping that with landscaping, we can kind of fix that. And the way the driveway comes in, it's basically pretty flat. It comes in from the road, drops down at the septic elevation, and then just barely goes up so the water won't go into the garage. And I think on this side, I think at the highest elevation of this retaining wall here, I think it was 4 feet. And again, once we work with the neighbor, it drops off and then goes right back up again. So it creates a little valley right now. And we're hoping to just remove that.
So what is the purpose of having, by the retaining wall, having it be 4 feet?
What happens here is I'm working with the grades that we have in here, that we've got proposed, okay? And ultimately, when we'll file either an RDA or a notice of intent, again, we have to get the permission of the neighbor. On preliminary conversations, they're amenable to this because the situation their backyard has right now. We can actually make that better by removing the wall and just continuing these grade lines until they hit into the side of his hill. And then the swale right now, he's got a very small, I don't know if you saw it or not, but probably about a 6 to 8 inch wide swale that was supposed to control all of the stormwater coming from his site. It just doesn't work. I mean, all that water just comes right straight down into this property. So what we're gonna end up doing over in here will be to widen that out and make an actual swale, which will push the water down into this area here. And ultimately just straight off the back of the property, which is where it goes. It just comes down here and goes down. So we're just gonna control a little bit more with that.
Anybody else? Get you there.
Amy?
Yes, sir.
Jim Snell, 49 Border Street. You'd be disappointed, I think, Frank, if I didn't have something to say, but
We just would like to, what I would like appreciate is that we don't need to repeat old
I
information.
hope not to, but just on the specifics that you've just heard.
Mm-hmm.
The original plan did call for and I think you can still see it here, considerable considerable grading on my piece of the property. Just to point out, if he eliminates this retaining wall, just think about it, and negotiates with the neighbor who was planning on being here, and it's not a given that he would, but suppose he did, now he's adding into the 14,600 square feet or square feet of yard, that gets incorporated also into any sort of stormwater calculation. It's clear from the regulations that adds to it, even though it's on another property, it's part of the same project. And so therefore, it's going to trigger stormwater regulations that he's trying to avoid. The other piece that's interesting is that he claims that there's no grading below here. That was a deliberate calculation that he made. This is different than the first plan that was presented. And he offered to put in this retaining wall here to basically eliminate a need. He'd bring the retaining wall up, eliminate the need to grade here. That, in some degree, helps him keep the square footage within the $15,000 max. But if you think about it, you're at grade here at about 16 feet, and this then, in this corner, which is going to be the garage by this calculation, there's no walkout under the garage, we all understand that, so from this retaining wall comes from 16 feet to 33 feet. So that's a 17-foot wall where he says there's going to be no grading underneath, just so you understand what he's proposing here. All right. I would like to make a couple more comments, and I'll try to keep them as brief as I can, but I do think that they're germane. This is the fourth time we've met. It's the fourth time we've talked about this. This is the fourth time that I've stood up in opposition to this project. I think we all want to move forward. Through this process, I'm reminded how hard each of you work, how devoted you are to this town, and how committed to the obligation you have before you. We all sit in this room feeling the pressure you face, the time constraints, and need to keep moving forward. Believe it or not, I've come to appreciate how difficult your job is. I have felt firsthand how allowing the kind of airtime that you've allowed me to the concerns of neighbors or butters sometimes feels like a hindrance, even a nuisance. I've appreciated your willingness consistently to allow me to speak, because I believe you also know that we, the neighbors and the abutters and the citizens of this town, are your eyes and ears in this community. You ask and expect, as your own regulations require, that applicants before you bring credible evidence from competent sources to support their petitions. Quite frankly, you have little choice but to believe them. You have to believe that they're trustworthy in order for this whole process to work. But I've been impressed that you've afforded me, too, the respect to be considered a credible source of information. How could it be otherwise, after all? Having lived on this marshland and next door to this piece of property for 36 years, my wife and I probably know better than anyone in this room. We have a vested interest in seeing that the right thing is done in developing it. We also have the time you do not to scrutinize the proposal. This is the value that citizens can and should bring to town governance. Without our scrutiny, would you have accepted at face value, for example, that the house to be torn down was built on a concrete slab that Mr. Borkland has insisted would be difficult to remove and pose unnecessary stress to the coastal bank when no such slab exists? Would you ever have known that wetlands flags on the site had been deliberately moved and removed before your peer consultant was able to review them, and then deliberately moved again after the consultation had been completed? Would you have known that the plan delineating the coastal bank that was submitted by Coastal Advisory Services to Diamond Development on January 8th was amended and a quite different plan, based on the exact same data, was forwarded to our conservation agent only 24 hours later, or that the site plan submitted with Mr. Borkland's notice of intent less than 2 weeks after that, based on the same data set, would again be different, or that the data in fact supports a strong likelihood that Mr. Borkland's proposal actually places his new structure closer to, not further from, the coastal bank. Situate Wetlands Regulations 10-0.03, Section 1A. The applicant shall have the burden of going forward with credible evidence from a competent source in support of all matters asserted by the applicant in accordance with his or her burden of proof. You've been commissioned to perform a difficult task. It requires that you weigh so many things so carefully. I get it, I really do. I've watched how hard this is. I honestly believe that you have the right to say to me, Mr. Spellman, we appreciate your concern and your genuineness here. We even appreciate the effort you made to bring these things to our attention. But in order to do our job, we rely on the opinion of experts, some of whom we ourselves employ to help us scrutinize these proposals. And we got no choice but to do so and to take their advice. I get it. But I also get that you could quite reasonably say to me, Mr. Spellman, like it or not, our job is not to tell a homeowner or a developer what they can build or where they can build it. One may not like a particular proposal, but this town grants a developer such as Mr. Portland broad latitude in allowing for what he can do.
Mr. Spellman, and I appreciate the philosophical piece of this, but what I'd really like to get to is the parts that you feel are either inconsistent or need to change. And I understand that this is next to your home, and it certainly gets there, but I'd like to, I'm sure this is well thought out, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate your trying to understand this and for us to listen, but I'd really like to get to the pieces that, I think otherwise it's going to get lost in all this, to be quite honest.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Okay?
Do you want to weigh in yet?
Well, I mean, could you speak about the Lucas? No. My problem is that what you've been presented is based on information that's, seems to me to be alternative fact. There's a lot of stuff in here that just plain ain't true. One of it was the house, was about the house being on a slab and not.
And I think to that point, that's why some of the commission members have an issue as to whether this needs to move or not. And so that point's well made.
And as my husband just said, the flags being moved, the coastal bank being up in the air in terms of where it is.
I think to the point of the flags, to the best of my knowledge, the wetlands delineations on these plans are correct now. We've had consultants review them and go back and forth, and to the best of my knowledge, the wetlands lines on this plan are correct. They've been reviewed by both Lucas, they were originally delineated by Mr. Holmes and then reviewed by Lucas. And so, I mean, I think that we can say without question that the lines on this plan are correct at this point.
But what about the coastal bank delineation? Because that doesn't seem to be.
So the coastal bank, and I do have a question here to look at that. I met with the coastal bank consultant for this property because Mr. O'Connell used to be the agent here, and I've relied on his information for a long time, and he actually called and said, could I meet him on this site to walk it with him as to how he determined where that coastal bank would be. And the piece that he agonized over the most is the piece that's adjacent to your property and how to come up with a location for that bank. And he explained to me personally, we were there together, how he determined exactly where that piece would be.
Closest to our house.
Yes.
And he
And
He
he,
had a good narrative.
and he did that, and he did it for a reason, because he wanted to be sure there's, in that particular location, there's not a definitive line. It's not like you can say, well, clearly here's the crest or whatever, and some person could say, argue that that coastal bank extended further up the hill because there's no natural break. Is basically where that
But it's the other,
came into.
other side that we're.
I understand that. So he and I went through this pretty carefully, and I got to tell you, I've done this now over 10 years on this commission, and one of the first things I learned about was coastal bank and how many different variations. It's harder to determine that than a wetlands line. And he went to great length to show me how he came up with that determination. And I don't believe there's a person on this board that could argue that. I mean, we could get other consultants to come out and take a look at it, but I don't think you'd find a more responsible person to do that. He's not a person that would compromise his integrity on any piece of this. And Jim looked at this really hard, trying to determine exactly where that would be. And he went through great lengths. I mean, I was there for over an hour with him showing me how he derived that line. And it wasn't...
And you looked at that number 1 transect line?
I did. And it's a very difficult one to do because, but it was explained to me in detail. And I mean, someone else could come out and argue, you could hire another consultant and that person could say, well, given that this slope or whatever, this could change to here or there. But I'm pretty comfortable with where he came up with that. I mean, there's other pieces of this that concern me, but it's not the coastal bank.
So the reason I go to doing this is just because it's easier for me to do this and the dialogue, which for me goes astray, and I appreciate that. I can get long-winded about this, but there are a number of inconsistencies, more than inconsistencies, misrepresentations. And I can stand behind those, and honestly, I will continue to stand behind my contention that the coastal bank is misrepresented. But the bottom line is, we could consider all this nitpicking. We could go back to the point where the guy's got enough, it's his property now, he's got the potential to build someplace. But the Wetlands Protection Act requires that the burden still falls on the petitioner, in this case Mr. Borkland, to show that this is not creating a deleterious impact to the property or to the wetlands. That's how it reads.
So what? Go ahead.
I just don't see that burden has been met. He's bringing in, by his own admission, over 1,000 cubic yards of fill. It is true that he's going to 8 feet in many parts of the stretches of the parcel. He's cutting into bedrock. He's taken down virtually every mature tree on the lot. And he says, well, I'll mitigate it by planting some stuff along the coastal. But it doesn't make sense.
These are big mature trees. This is work. This is a big.
I can show you. I have pictures. I took pictures.
No, we've all been there. We've been there. We've all been there. And so you've heard the dilemma of the commission members between moving this house back further away from the marsh, okay? Because obviously today we wouldn't condition a home to be built where the existing home is now. But then we have the situation where there is a home there, the area's already been disturbed, and is it necessary to redisturb the area, move that? So the commission's already weighing all that out, okay?
But didn't Lucas, it seemed to me from the Lucas report that they're preferred, they would environmentally preferred to have it at that site.
They are your peer reviewers, and they have twice come down saying, why can't you use the present site? They are the ones who've said that.
Right.
He did say that, but he also said that we could let him use the new site.
He did.
That's where we're having our problem.
So, and then to Penny's point earlier about how much of this needs to be revegetated. If this piece is allowed, if this proposed plan is allowed, would there be different vegetation, or to see this return to a more natural area in the place where the house was, and things, all these things, when we close this hearing, okay, if we close it tonight, when we close it, then the commission will take all this information, everything that we've discussed, and we're gonna put together a set of orders for this project.
And you're,
I'm
I'm hoping you're closing this in by
Or we could,
not to approve the petition
or we
at all.
could deny it, or we could approve it with conditions, and we could say, fine, you can do a project here, however, you could be limited to this, or this has to be changed, or whatever, those can be, and then the applicant can either accept those, or they could appeal them. Just as an abutter, you can appeal the decision of the commission.
I understand, and again, I don't want to sort of continue to beat what begins to feel like
Yep.
a dead horse. It does not feel to me like bringing in over 1,000 cubic yards of fill, raising the height of the land by many, many feet, cutting down all the trees, any of that suggests that this is going to be, in his words, an environmental enhancement to the property,
And you can hear, and you've heard that our commission members feel, some of them question the same thing, so.
And Lucas is basically pointing out this area that he's talking about.
You're saying the same thing.
This is the only undisturbed
Yep.
portion of the wetland.
I get it,
So there you have it, that's.
okay.
I also want to make the point that the zoning board of appeals hearing, which we thought was going to be supposedly cover the non-conforming nature of the lot being the 50-foot road frontage, and maybe whether or not there was enough upland in order to do this project, more than 20%, was just about whether or not there was the property line with on the most western portion was 15 feet, and it's 14.6 feet. And in fact, it's not, because my husband looked at it, it's more than 15 feet,
It's just another distortion, that's all.
And B, we know the history of that property, which was that the property, there was an issue, and they went ahead and he bought some property from the man next door.
In order to
bring it to
16 feet, actually, they gave himself an extra.
Yeah.
They built the property too close to they moved the property, the house, too close to the line. Neil Gray bought from Arthur Kern the footage to bring it to 16 feet, and now he's telling us it's 14 feet, 6 inches.
Which doesn't
It's
really
just
matter,
another
except that that's
distortion.
another argument for, I can't go there, it has to be moved, which it doesn't.
Sure.
It's actually really close to our property line at this point, so I mean, it's just.
Yeah. All right, well, you certainly have brought many things to light. We appreciate that piece of it.
Well, I have one other comment, which is that on the back side of this, since they're now not filling, is gonna be this looming thing looking over the marsh. It's just, I mean.
The back of the garage.
The back of the house.
Back of the garage. The
That's
rest of
right.
the walkout is true, but that garage is,
I understand.
That's an edifice.
Yep. Okay. I think we have all the information we need on this.
I appreciate your time.
And then we're going to, again, we'll close the hearing, and then we can vote to go from there.
I'd like to be able to respond, if I can, to a couple of the comments.
Sure.
Okay, and I'll be as brief as I can. I've been accused of moving wetland flags by the abutters. What I just handed to you is a copy of a 2015 wetland delineation from John Zimmer. I'll actually give my abutter one as well, so that he can see that there were 10 flags placed out on the property. Flag number 1 was closest to his property. There were no other flags that were taken down by me. Okay? We actually did go out with his permission and add more flags, because maybe Mr. Zimmer originally didn't go far enough, but the new plan depicts the accurate wetland lines like Frank had said. When I talked about the house being on a slab, what I meant was there's no room for foundation underneath the house. So in order to construct a new dwelling, I got two options. I've either got to dig down into that to have a foundation under my house, or I've got to bring in fill up against the front of my house so I can make it act like a walkout basement. That's one of the reasons I chose the location to push the house further ahead to reduce the amount of fill on this lot. So again, I didn't just go into this, as you may say, willy-nilly. I took the least amount of disturbance as far as moving material and those types of things. If the house stays down where it is, I'm still going to have to build the septic system up the hill. I'm still going to put the fill there. And that fill does not extend to the abutter's property. In fact, his house is at a higher location. So when I talk about water and where it's going and all that, it is not going anywhere near his house, okay? As far as the coastal bank, Frank did a great job. He was out there with Jim. I hired who I thought was the best to delineate the coastal bank. I'm actually glad that Frank was out there with him, I guess, so Jim could understand that. That also was reviewed by your consultant and deemed to be accurate as well. So to state that I'm making all these misstatements about what's going on out there is completely inaccurate. And I've been doing this 35 years in the town of Scituate. I believe what we have is a nice project here. There are a number of performance standards that I have to meet because I did move the location in the house further from the coastal bank and further away from the wetlands. So what I have to do is I have to make sure that that coastal bank could, one, provide a sediment source to the downstream beach. It's not a sediment source, it's all vegetated, and there is no downstream beach. And I have to make sure I don't disturb that so it provides storm damage prevention. I'm not touching the bank, so it's still going to provide what it needs to for storm damage prevention. Those are the performance standards as a commission that you need to look at to do work within that area. Under the local bylaw, you have a 50-foot buffer strip. Time and time again in this town, if somebody wants to work in the 50-foot buffer strip, you do it based on enhancement. If I'm going to work in that area, you ask me for enhancement in the area. I have no problem increasing the amount of enhancement if I need to get the project approved. I've said that before, I'll say it again. As far as the stormwater is concerned, we've heard my neighbor talk about how I'm avoiding the stormwater bylaw. If you go back and listen to the meetings like I did today, again before I came here, you will hear me in those meetings say that if we have to come back for a modification and somebody wants to do something different that purchases his house and it kicks in the stormwater, they'll be in front of the Conservation Commission. If it's not something for the Conservation Commission, it'll be something for the Planning Board. Never have I said we're doing this to avoid the stormwater bylaw, okay? The amount of fill we have there, or the amount of disturbed area in there that qualifies, in my opinion, under the stormwater bylaw, being under the 15,000 square feet, is what's designed into most of the projects because, again, the cost of the project. And this one just happened to be, I wanted to move the house as far up the hill as I possibly could. And within inches, that's what I'm trying to do. If I keep it further down the hill, in my opinion, it's going to require a lot more fill for me to make this look like a nice site. Or I've got to blast out right on that coastal bank, and you've been on the deck. You were out there with me on that deck. That coastal bank is right on that deck. I'm willing to revegetate that whole area and leave it alone. That's why we drove this design of the project. That's about all I'm going to say.
So no.
And I could say a lot more, but that's all I'm going to say for here.
I appreciate it.
Can I just add
So
that if this is...
I would like to ask a question. I would like to know how much of the lawn we can eliminate and replant trees. So if I could get just an idea of how many trees that actually will be cut down for this project, I'd like to see the same amount of trees be replanted so that like zeroes it out. But I would like to just understand that whole green section there.
Yep.
It's all lawn.
Well, no, not the, I mean, you can see all the plantings and everything that are in there as well. Can you see
Right.
that?
So if you
So,
could just,
so some of that's already going to end up going back to natural vegetation.
okay, so show me how much of this is actually going to stay as lawn.
This location down in here is already lawn area, okay, from the existing house. If you went down in there,
Steve, why don't you come around a little bit this way?
And you can see, because they dug some perk tests down in this area here. So I mean, I can't get away from everybody.
Go, you're fine.
That's okay.
Okay.
I'm good.
I'm trying, I apologize, but I'm trying.
You know what?
But this area in here, they conducted some perk tests down in here. That's on grassed area down in there. This area over here obviously is disturbed with driveway and with the house itself. If what you're looking for, and I think this is what Penny's looking for, is to try and take more of this area in here and plant more of this area.
Yes, yes.
I don't have a problem replacing each and every tree that comes down with what you require me to put out for trees.
Okay.
If it's 1-to-1, I don't have a problem with that, okay? Again, your 50-foot bylaw requires that mitigation, okay? What you guys are comfortable with for mitigation, you're doing exactly what you should do. You should be asking me, you know, what am I gonna do for this, okay? That's done as a condition quite often. I have no problem accepting that as a condition. You know, again, when this house comes down in this location here, even if I have trees in that area, that's going to enhance my neighbor who is directly above me to be able to have some type of a view out to the river when I move the house over into this location. Mr. Spellman's home, and again, I'm going to move this way for a second, is up in this location here. He has also a very nice view of the river, okay? So I'm trying to balance this out between the neighbors in here. They have stated that I'm getting close to this side over in here. I'm not close to that side. I'm more than double what I have to be. I believe I'm more than double what I have to be. Matter of fact, if I can turn this over for just a second, I'll tell you that I'm 34.9 feet. So I'm more than double what I have to be as my setback line. You can see the dotted lines on the plan. As far as zoning goes, that's exactly what the zoning board says, is I can put the house anywhere within the dotted lines. Okay? They talked about, and again, I guess I'm misrepresenting the lot that I'm purchasing on the plan, because my engineer, after we resurveyed everything, found that the house is 14'4" from the sideline. That's not really an issue for the zoning board of appeals. Whether that was 15 feet, 16 feet, or 20 feet, that's not the issue. The reason I went to the zoning board of appeals is because I have a lot that has 50 feet of frontage. Okay? So in order for me to construct something that's more than 20% larger than the original house, I have to do that by going to the zoning board of appeals for a 48 section 6 finding. That's exactly what I did, no matter where this existing house lay. Okay, but
I know you're trying to defend your integrity out there,
Absolutely.
but I get it. But we'd like to just deal with the wetland stuff and.
Okay, well, again, I just wanted to show where that setback was.
Okay.
So if it boils down to the mitigation, I have no problem with that.
All right.
What about some roof runoff dry wells?
That's generally a condition as well,
Yeah.
which is fine. We do that on almost every house we build.
But so we want to see the details and proposed locations on a revised plan.
Okay.
So just wondering whether you feel comfortable with closing.
I think we can
without
close, and
things?
if it's approved, then we'll condition in the things that we want to add to that.
If it's approved, yeah, okay, got it.
You could condition those, yeah,
Okay.
in the, yeah.
I don't know how you can cut down 100, 200-year-old trees and then plant a few new ones in there and mitigate it. I don't see that as, these are big trees.
I understand that they're large trees, and they're not going to plant those large trees again. They're going to plant smaller trees. In a lot of these cases, these trees have already matured, and we're seeing a lot of these trees fall over because they're at that point. And from an environmental standpoint, actually revegetating with smaller trees can be an environmental positive. Not saying that it looks great right out of the gate. I'm with you on that, and it's a shame to lose some of those things. Believe me, we don't like to see it either. But to revegetate and add an area that's right now disturbed can be a positive.
And one more thing about this,
I'm not defending it tonight. I'm just saying those are the pros and cons when we discuss or look at something like that.
in terms of the wildlife habitat and birds, and you're not going to replace that with.
No, not right away.
This 4-foot wall between the neighbors and this, if that's not done, then it's going to require more fill brought in. That should.
And at that point, then they'd have to deal with the stormwater piece, more than likely.
But doesn't the stormwater get triggered because of the incline? I mean, you've got a.
I don't.
And the barriers.
1,000 feet over 4-to-1, and clearly.
Okay.
Those are good points, and it could be that the stormwater bylaw will be triggered.
Yes.
We've had those discussions, but it appears that Mr. Bjorklund would like to take that up separately. So for right now, I think we should focus on the project.
I thought it was triggered by retaining walls also. Retaining
Well,
walls.
retaining wall.
No.
Not per se, but there's just one one final observation, if I might, and if it's germane, I don't know. This board, every board up and down this hallway struggled with the property at 61 Border Street, the Lilly property that went in 5 or 6 years ago, now owned by my neighbors, Whitlands. To my knowledge, nobody was happy with that project. It's there now, but drive down Border Street. They made every effort to meet your requirements as well. They kept what trees they could on the lot. They did what they could to mitigate, and it's an unmitigated disaster in terms of the aesthetic of Border Street, which, by the way, is one of the Scituate's scenic roads. Just look at it, and nobody drives down that street without saying, oh my God, what happened there? We're asking that the same will happen next door.
Okay, thank you.
I got 2 final points, and then I'm done.
We've heard that too many times already.
That's okay. I don't believe the house in front of me was in front of you guys for an order of conditions. I'm not positive on that,
No,
but if
what?
based on my resource areas, they're completely outside your resource areas, and there was no mitigation as far as conservation is concerned. You have the ability here
But, yeah,
to have
that-
whatever you want for mitigation. And I just wanted to state for Jen that any decision that this board makes is not binding on any other. So you can't say, because you do this once, you have to do this all the time. Okay, so it's just every decision stands on its own.
But precedents
Yeah.
are set
Do
when
count.
we do something.
Right, if we see the same exact project again, with all the same,
And honestly, if we approved a project and then you came in with the exact one and we denied that, you'd be asking why. So,
If I came in with one, I would believe it would be an approvable project.
I'm sure you do. Okay.
okay,
No.
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 All righty.
I want a motion.
A motion to close.
Have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, what about
Right.
the landscaping plan?
It's
So-
just a motion to
That's in the
close.
orders.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
motion to close.
That's in the orders.
Yeah.
So you
Okay,
could, you
next.
close the hearing and then there'll be a set of orders. So the option you have right now would be to close the hearing and then set of orders. And we've discussed a whole bunch of things. They'll come up in the orders. If the applicant feels aggrieved with that, he can appeal our decision. If not, the other option would be to deny the project.
Well, just like we did with Toll Brothers tonight, we discussed, and
Yeah.
Mr. Bajorklin is well aware of what we're gonna be asking for.
I'll be working on it tomorrow.
We had like 5 2-year-old trees and 6 7-year-old trees and
I'll immediately call Brad Holmes and get him started on more enhanced planting.
Okay. So again, we have a motion and we have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yes, I'm opposed.
So Richard is opposed to that, Carol. Okay?
I'd like to make one more point, and I.
No, it's closed.
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 Yeah.
I just want this
We
to
can't
be
discuss it anymore.
Because
Wait.
litigious nature, and that he took the town to court for years and years and years.
this is closed.
Yeah,
that
let's,
would be
what are we
right.
gonna do next?
Thank you. Heat at 62 Glades Road?
Oh, yeah, no, we already did.
That's continued.
Continue.
To May
Yeah.
7th.
Yes.
Okay. So then,
We got Postscript Lane, this septic,
I gotta open that one, right? Yep.
yeah.
That's where I put all my notes. On April 23rd, 6:30 PM, the Town Hall, Situate Conservation Commission will hold a wetland hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40 of the Massachusetts General Laws and Section 30700 Town of Situate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of Michelle
Skolnick.
to
We killed
raise and
that.
rebuild a dwelling including a septic system and associated utilities on property located at 4 Postscript Lane, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. Good evening.
How are you?
Sorry about that.
Not a problem. I'm Rob Skolnick, my wife Michelle. We've owned the property at 4 Postscript Lane. This will be our 7th season there. But Michelle has lived next door on Brunswick Street since 1970, and I'm a lifelong resident of Hummerock as well. Our kids are 4th generation from Hummerock, so we have a deep understanding of the importance of the Conservation Committee.
I always wonder why.
You're surrounded.
I know. He's got 3 in a row from Humrock, so.
No, it's a beautiful area. I just have to.
Yeah.
He's just sticking
Now,
us.
Being in the middle of the
Especially
woods.
this morning, we were walking the beach and we saw the whales. They were
Oh, yeah.
literally, they were probably,
Yeah.
they were maybe 300 yards out, and we could hear them. It was amazing.
Really?
Yeah,
I could hear
I've
them
never
this
seen anything like
morning,
it.
yeah. Working on my deck, yep.
Yeah.
Yesterday, today.
A guy told me, I was out on First Cliff today, and the guy was,
Yeah.
neighbor was saying they were
I'll
right
call you,
there.
I'll call you next time.
I saw it on TV. I would have been there.
They gave Marshfield the credit. They don't know where Humrock is.
So,
That's awesome.
I'd like to introduce Heidi Condon, who's the architect on the project,
Hey, Heidi.
and John Cavanaro of Cavanaro Consulting. And John's going to take you through our plan here and show you what we'd like to do.
Get the A-team.
That's it.
There you go.
Good evening. Thanks,
John.
Haven't seen you for a
Rob.
while.
I'm going to walk through the site plan. Heidi can answer questions relative to the building itself. This is obviously a two-dimensional plan that you're used to seeing. It's a small plan. I don't know if you want to bring it any closer to you.
For some reason, I never
It's a small lot. It's about an 8,400 square foot lot. If you're familiar with Postscript Lane, faces on the South River. It's sort of a narrow gravel road that dead ends to this house. Michelle's folks are next door. Postscript is really a paper street that goes right to the South River. There's a house adjacent to Postscript as well. This house is it's a small, about 700 square foot or so footprint, single-story bungalow, and it currently is non-flood compliant naturally. It's on the ground level at about 8.5, and the flood elevation is about 13. It's also non-compliant from a Title V standpoint. It has a failed septic system. So the two real bonus features that we're excited about the reconstruction here is that we'll get a new Title V compliant septic system, and we're going to make the house flood compliant. So right now, the house is a single story, as I mentioned. There's really no opportunity for floodwaters to get around the house. They go through the house. The house has experienced flooding from the South River. Fortunately not catastrophic, but it still gets up to less than a foot in flooding, but well below the actual designated flood elevation, but
What's the
still-
elevation that this house has to go to, John?
This has to go to elevation 13. The flood elevation is 13, we're
Yeah,
bringing it to 1
14.
foot above that, so
Yeah.
14. So that's the,
And what's the grades on the site right now?
it's about 8.5, so it's about an elevated structure. Right now, the dune, as far as resource areas, we have salt marsh that comes off the river, a little coastal beach, and then we have a dune that comes up against the structure itself. So one benefit that we're looking for here, in addition to allowing the floodwaters to pass through underneath the structure, we'll also have an opportunity to let this dune actually grow a little bit, get a little bit more dynamic, because we'll have the opportunity for the sands to migrate as they don't do now. Right now, they just stop at the deck, they stop at the house, as indicated by the shape of the dune itself. There's also sort of a patchy, sandy, gravelly mix around the house, and the plan is to consolidate the walkways and to try to minimize the sand paths from the dock to the house itself, so that would also allow us to let some of the natural vegetation come back, enhance that with some beach grasses, some dune grasses, but really leave it more of a natural. We don't have to take down any trees for this project. We're really working primarily within the footprint of the building. We are growing it a little bit. As Steve had just mentioned in the previous hearing, we are going for a zoning board of appeals permit because we're increasing the footprint by more than 20%, which in this case, we're starting with only a little over 700 square feet. So it's not a big increase, but yet we do need to get that Section 6 finding. The reality is, though, even though we're increasing the living space and the actual footprint, the on-the-ground footprint is going down dramatically because we're taking a house that sits on the ground at about 700 square feet and we're going to replace it with less than 40 piles that are going to be 1 square feet. So we're going from about 700 square feet to about 37 square feet on the ground. So, and it's an elevated structure. Really, the only other expansion of the footprint are the decks to get this vertical house that's now at grade. We have to build decks and stairs to get up to the elevated grade at about 6 feet above the ground. So we will have a deck in the front. This does go beyond. Mostly the house is growing in the easterly direction. Right now, the house footprint sits just like this, and there's a deck that extends out to the dune. What we're proposing to do is to have a second floor overhang that will span about halfway across that deck, and then we'll have an open air deck that will match the existing limit of the existing deck. So we're not going beyond what the existing deck is on the ground, and it'll also be elevated by 6 feet. So again, we think we're creating a benefit because we're going to allow that dune to grow and also provide flood water penetration to happen that doesn't exist today. Lastly, what we're looking to do is also, as I mentioned, sort of narrow some of these footpaths, but because right now there's parking on the side of the house and in the front of the house. What we're planning to do is to let this come back to its natural state, remove some of this gravel that's migrated over here for parking, and designate the parking specifically on the easterly end of the lot, so further away from the resource areas, closer to the stairs to the existing house. And the plan is to revegetate this with, again, this isn't a lawn property, it's a grass property. It's a beach grass type property.
You're at the beach.
It's a beach, it's a dune, it's a salt marsh. With that, I don't know if Heidi, if you have any questions about the building itself, why the renovation, or if you want to give a quick synopsis of.
It's completely, if it would help
Yeah.
all of you, as the Skolniks explained, they've been there 4 generations, and they have 2 sons, and this is a family home, and they want it to be a family home. It's a 2-bedroom. We're maintaining the 2-bedroom. We're going from 720 square feet slab. The new footprint is roughly 917, but we have 2 stories.
Yeah.
And it's, they want to maintain the dune and the grasses. We pulled it, we grew it back away from the river. And they understand the quality of living in this very sensitive area, and they love it, and they still want to have their family have this home here. And realistically, a family of 4, we just needed more space. But we do feel going from a 720 square foot slab to 37 piers is a significant improvement. We're no longer damaging property. We're allowing the dune as well as water to flow and move around the house, which it cannot do right now. And that was kind of the goal of the project.
Our original decision on this was, this is strictly a summer house right now. There's no insulation whatsoever, and we intend to make this our full-time residence. Our kids are, one is graduating college and the other is in college. So they'll just be around the summertime, but we intend to make this our full-time residence.
It's different in the winter.
Very different.
It's really good, though, if you're above 13 feet.
Yes, it is.
Just move your cars.
Yeah, you gotta move your cars.
Yeah, it's a different world
I
down
don't
there.
have any questions, but this says septic. Are you putting a new septic in? Where's
Yeah.
that going?
Did
Did I miss it?
Yeah, you
You
did.
did miss it.
I was sleeping?
Yeah, it's, right now it's a failed cesspool. It drains right out to a cesspool. We'll be putting a Title V compliant system
Okay.
in along the side.
I don't know where I was. Thank you. Yep.
It's fine,
That's
dramatic
good.
improvement.
Paul?
Yeah, huge improvement. It's right on the marsh and the tidal area. Be good to get it up.
Yep, positive move.
Chen? Good?
It's nice.
Amy?
Yep, positive move. A couple of things. One is, I think they're still waiting for Board of Health comments on the septic system.
We had some minor comments. We responded to them. We will be going in front of them on Monday.
Okay.
Oh, that's good, okay. And DEP number did come through
Yep, we're good
with no comment. Still waiting for Board of Health approval. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a sensitive area. They're going up, not going closer to the river, because applicable regulations are gonna be the Rivers Protection Act, Wetlands Protection Act, Scituate bylaw. Overall, a good improvement.
Okay.
So I would probably, if you're good with the project,
Closed subject to
but we're also
BOH.
waiting for ZBA to come through too. So on other projects like this, we've continued until the Board of Health and ZBA has come through. But that would, not expecting any comment. I mean, there wouldn't be another full hearing like this, but just to make sure that you get those approvals. That's how we've handled
Yeah, and
this.
zoning, wouldn't you want to wait just in case they,
That's what we just did for Steve's. We do that for
No, I
others.
understand that, but this is more, to me anyways, it's more straightforward. And we numerous times, not with you, Amy, but we do close pending Board of Health approval in the past.
no,
Right,
Board of
so
Health's no
they
problem. I'm
can't-
worried about
It's
zoning
ZBA.
though, if they don't have a ruling and you close the hearing and then they change the footprint of the house or.
But
Well,
if we do
it's-
anything, it'll be smaller. ZBA would make me,
Right, that's
reduce-
true.
I
That's a
can't-
good
I can't
point.
larger.
That's, no, I'm just thinking of you, because if you close it,
We
Well,
can't
I
have
think
to start
I
over.
would feel more comfortable with the Board of Health, knowing that their comments were resolved, which I don't
Well-
have that.
John, do you remember what the questions were from Board of Health?
I don't actually. There weren't very much at all. We're going in front of the board because it's a property line variance.
Yeah.
But it's a gravity system. There's really no comments.
Right. A couple of questions. So who did the resource areas?
John Zimmer.
Okay. And the driveway, is that just gravel?
Yes.
Okay. And Heidi, what, are you designing this to the 2018?
Yes, and we'll also be using Rivermore Engineering. They will be engineering the entire frame,
Yeah.
you know, hurricane impact.
Are you seeing any changes? This is more a curiosity thing.
They complied their structural drawings to that revised,
Okay.
requirements.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's pier frame, 2x6, we have hurricane impact windows, and they have those specific hurricane connections.
Right. Just curious with this new, with the new 18 code.
This one is so straightforward.
And they've
It's
changed some of the wind stuff, but.
They have, so the wind framing might have changed the loads, but, it's a box.
Yeah,
It's not, we don't have a lot that's cantilevered, we don't have a lot of complicated roof lines.
sure.
So I really didn't see many new.
Okay. This is more from an educational standpoint than
You
a,
might want to ask Pete Falk.
no, I don't know.
He thought it was such a straightforward building
Sure,
that,
good. I mean, that could go either way. We could, I think it's a pretty straightforward project. I don't have a problem closing, and if it's just, it would only be that there was something really dramatic that had to change, which I'm not seeing that.
But it would be smaller, not larger.
Yeah.
right, so that's a good point. That wouldn't be an issue.
Right.
yeah, I can't move it
Right,
this way.
right. No, if they came back and denied it, you could build the same size footprint,
That's
right.
all I could do, and
Yeah.
I don't think, if I have to shrink anything, it might be something that's so small it doesn't affect a conservation
Right.
issue.
Okay.
It would
But
be
it
more
could
setback
change
issues.
the plan date, so,
Normally,
I don't know,
we
just-
don't close if there's a meeting with Board of Health, do we?
Yeah. We have.
We've done it both ways, yeah.
Yeah, I think you've done it both ways, but I
Yeah.
think we've been in trouble before, which is
Okay.
why we've leaned the other way, not doing it, waiting
3-minute
for
thing next
Board of Health to come through.
That's,
Especially
you know,
Board of Health.
it's
But
fine.
not
It just-
with a
this
meeting
is-
with the full team.
If it would make you feel more comfortable, we'll do that.
we're
As-
fine.
As long as we can keep it moving and the
Oh,
next,
yeah.
so we all don't have to come to the next hearing, just
I
at
don't
the
think-
expense of the applicant.
Unless there's some dramatic change, it's
Major.
just, we'll continue it, get Board of Health, we close.
And then just vote it, yeah, everything's good here. We just want to make sure you don't get messed up by
Sure.
closing it.
No, we appreciate that.
That prevents us from accepting new information.
Sure. Yep.
But in fact, on other projects like this, you know, we've kept it open, and then the engineer hasn't even come to the
Okay.
next meeting.
All
Just
right,
kind of like
maybe if there's
reopen
no
it
changes,
and then
Yep.
close it.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
When is your next hearing?
7th.
May 7th, 6:20.
So my ZBA hearing's May 17th, so I won't have that information.
With the
It was just the
CBA,
Board
I
of
think the
Health.
Board of Health is our,
Board of
Oh,
Health
so you
is
don't
on
care
the
about
30th.
ZBA?
well, we care about that, but.
No, your point was great. It's not going to be, you know, it's going to be this, what you proposed or smaller.
Exactly.
So,
we're not holding
And I
that,
have
even
the
if
right
it's
to build
closed,
smaller than what you approve anyways.
right,
Right.
So-
yeah.
Okay, so Board of Health is on Monday, we'll be here the following.
So we'd be able to get on the May 7th
Yes.
agenda?
Yep.
And
You're
do we
on
need,
at
If Penny makes it,
6:20.
oh,
do you
we
want us,
just decided?
do we need to be
Okay.
present for that? If
No.
it's just
No.
unless
Really don't.
something happens?
Unless
No.
there's some
Yeah.
big changes.
Right.
We're just keeping it open just in case something
it.
changes, that's it.
Absolutely.
Everything
Makes
else
sense.
is good,
Okay.
yeah.
And we'll let you know if we think you need to be here.
Okay.
So you have no abutters, so.
We've
that-
talked to the.
Yeah, everybody's well aware of it.
Yep, should be good.
Great.
Great,
I
great.
wish-
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Good, we did it now.
Thank you.
All that time.
I'm going to the ladies' room.
No.
I knew they didn't want to come back.
Thanks.
Preparing for the worst after that meeting, right?
I just, it's such a,
Didn't change it, but that's okay.
Thank you.
Got orders of conditions.
hang up, yeah, we gotta do those quick.
All right,
I
let's
got-
go.
All right, I make a motion that we accept the conditions as written for 18 Low Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I make a motion we accept the orders of condition for 2 Prospect as written.
Yep. Second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
I make a motion we accept Tory Lane as written.
Lot 2, right?
Lot
Yes.
2.
Yes. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I make a motion we accept the orders for Cedar Point, replace gravity sewer system
Yep,
as
second.
written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I make a motion we accept the orders for 6 Brookline Road
Second.
as written.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I make a motion we accept the orders for 125 River Street as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Lions, Revere Street.
Did, Amy?
Kibbe?
Yeah, so that one actually is right around the corner from this postscript one.
Oh, yeah.
Like literally.
Literally is
And
exactly
so
right.
if you know that one, you know the dune grass that they're talking about, the type of dune and, you know, beach grass.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, so that one's all set.
Okay, good.
So the Hatherley Road partial C of C request, you all know that project a lot better than I do because it's a pretty recent 4-lot kind of subdivision. It was a raised
Right
rebuild.
by Marion Road? Off of Hatherley?
Stevens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So anyways, one of the lots apparently has a buyer, so they have a request for a partial C of C. And I did go out there, you know, the stormwater basin is in, it's vegetated. They've got a trail that, you know, looks like that's also in. That stormwater component also involved planning board, so I think that they actually wear the, you know, the main, whatever, regulator on the stormwater permit, even though it's also tied into the order of conditions.
Yeah.
One of the things that the order had was vegetation replication. There was knotweed, which was supposed to be treated and removed, and then they had plantings, which were not done. But that's not part of this C of C request. I think that they have it worded so that it's just specifically for the basin and some of the other, the roadway, getting in, the driveway, the basin, and some of the infrastructure. So, I mean, I don't know, we don't prefer to issue partial C of Cs. If we can handle it with a letter to the bank, that would be preferred. If you did a partial C of C, then we could consider an escrow holdback. I know that you've done that in the past before. I'm just afraid that, you know, you issue this and now that allows everybody to close and you never get your plantings in. You know what I mean? And there was a significant replication
Right.
plan that was part of it. If you want to see, I can break out the plans.
No, that's what I was gonna
Hold
ask.
back.
What happens when the next one gets sold and they want another partial for that?
Yeah.
You know, partial.
That's actually
Yeah,
good-
so I
that's a
don't
good
really
point.
understand how, I mean, the partial for just these stormwater components, well, first of all, I think that before we signed off on it, it's really, planning needs to be in the decision-making seat there too, since they were the one, I think, that was issuing authority on that, from correspondence I read. But it's the plantings that aren't in, and I'd hate to have that somehow now be an indication that they're all set. On escrow, you could deal with it that way. The house that is 105 is actually out of the jurisdiction, so perhaps a letter, you know, could handle that.
Yeah.
But the developer is definitely pushing for this, so.
Right, and in some cases, they do need it to sell a property. I mean, it's you gotta kind of balance, like you were saying, escrow.
Right.
Try to help them the way you can if a letter will work, or,
Yeah.
I did prioritize it with we've got, probably a backlog of many dozen requests that have been pushed aside because they've been lacking one thing or another, you know what I mean? And so, you know, I don't want this one to fall into that category. I think, if anything, the developer should be encouraged to put the plants in and get that window ticking, you
Yeah.
know, so.
Why aren't the plants in now?
I
Just
don't know.
they probably weren't available.
Yeah, that
right,
could be.
it's still kind of early in the
Yeah.
planting season. It
We've
just
had
started.
They're just
Cold
coming
spring.
out now,
Yeah.
instead of rolling them
Oh,
out now.
it is. I mean, let's face it, it's been freezing out.
Snowed
Right.
last week.
The other three houses appear to
Planting
be
beach grass. this late.
still under
Yeah.
construction, so.
Yeah.
So do you think you could take this with some escrow money?
Well, I can talk to Steve and see if that's the way they'd like to handle it.
Yeah. We want to, I mean, it's a
I mean, because
pretty.
then there's an amount, like, how do you set the price?
Well, I
You
mean,
know what
it's a pretty substantial project
It
with a
is.
lot left to complete,
Right.
so you definitely want to look at that. It's not a small number.
I'd be looking for some guidance on that.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think we're really in the habit of doing partials, but on the other hand,
That's the problem with these developments.
What are you doing at 214 Clap Road?
We gave a partial.
Yeah, well, it is a tough thing, because you tell someone you gotta do all this stuff for the development, and the builder builds a house, and then you can't
But he
sell
did-
one house because of
I know.
sometime all of these encompassing.
And we just
Yeah.
talked about Toll Brothers.
Yeah. I know. It's a quandary to me.
yeah,
But
that's a
remember,
big
you-
sticking, but, well, that's why you want to have a condition to have these plantings done in the
Right.
beginning. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yes.
Get it done right out of the gate.
Or a mechanism, but it's not always that simple. I mean,
Right.
it just isn't.
Yeah.
And
It sounds.
as long as
You're right.
as long as, go ahead.
I'm sorry, is there a way, is there something we can reach out to and kind of do a guesstimate forecast of what plantings would cost based on quarter acre, half acre, 3/4 of an acre, to give us a ballpark, to then put that money aside to draw off of? I mean, I don't know if it would
Right, and that's the whole purpose of the escrow. They're
Right.
gonna plant, then you're gonna release the
Right,
escrow.
exactly.
If they didn't, they would forfeit
Right.
the escrow.
Right,
But to derive that number.
yeah, to come up with
Yeah.
that number.
We'll have to get some idea of what's not completed, and then take a look at that and say, what's the number?
Well, that's
And
what
we can
I
come
was
up with that.
saying, a guesstimate based on the amount of
Right.
square footage, you know, whether
Right.
it's,
Let me,
a nursery might
talk
be
with
able to help.
the developer and see if we can come up with a solution to
Yep.
keep it moving forward, and let them know your thoughts, that if we were to issue a partial, you're thinking we'd need an escrow.
Right.
So,
It'd be
but
sizable.
a
Yep.
sizable escrow to, to take into consideration what
Maybe,
they owe us.
maybe they can present that to us, you know,
Okay.
they can talk to whoever they get their plans from and have them
Okay.
put
Yep.
it together.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Support letter for Tack Factory?
Yes, the selectmen have asked me to ask the board if we could write a letter, they need it by the end of the week, to go to the AG. It would be the Tack Factory Pond area. It's in the swap for the 6 acres that they use for the public safety to put that Ellis Estate to bed. And this piece of property, to me, it is just perfect. It's double the size, it's 12 acres. It protects the watershed, it's right on the back end of Tack Factory. It's a kind of a more diverse area too. So anyways.
It abuts other conservation
Yeah.
property and water
If you
department
wanna
property.
Protects
see,
the
I did
water
bring a map.
resources.
Is
Is
it-
it publicly accessible?
Huh?
Is it publicly accessible?
It will be. Yeah.
I think-
It isn't at the moment because we don't have any trails out there, but it's something that we'd be looking for down the line.
This one would be a little trickier, Jen, in that there's
isn't
access
any-
off of, it's off of Old Oak and Bucket Tack Factory. What's the, Scituate, what's the name of it?
It's called Tack Factory, the road
There's a
back there.
subdivision off of Old Oak and Bucket, and the water department has a road that goes into a well
This is it.
site, so that the access would probably not be off of 3A.
Doesn't say how much that.
It would be off of Old Oak and Bucket. It's an area that we haven't done anything with trails on or anything like that right now.
This is Tack
And
Factory Pond.
part of it's because it's part of the water department piece. People, boat or fishermen are on
Yep,
Tack
you can
Factory
get in
Pond.
there.
You can go up to that far end and go up
This
into that
is
creek. There's some ways to come at it.
It's more
Old Oak and Bucket, but we don't have any real trail system or
But not
whatever.
because we couldn't.
Right.
It would, like, even though it's water department-ish.
Yeah, we could work out something, I'm sure. The water department has a little bit different outlook on the use of their property than we do. I mean, they're trying to protect that solely for water. We want to try to use it in combination with things, so it's a little bit more security or whatever think of. But certainly it could be something that could be opened up. And we already have adjoining conservation property, so it would be a nice piece.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
do you want to see this, Jen?
we were asked, the commission was asked, when the, I think everybody knows, but this goes back to the safety building.
Yep.
And there's the town decided, rather than argue about this with the AG's office, that they'd just find a piece of property to exchange.
Yep.
And they came to us with several parcels. Penny and I looked at them, and we felt that this was the best parcel of all the ones that they put out there.
This made more sense, plus it protects the water
Well, it's the
and,
water supply.
yeah, right.
It's the
But-
water
Yeah.
supply.
But we kind of picked what we thought was the
Yeah.
best piece of
Yeah.
property out there.
And then the selectmen, thankfully, they picked it, but the AG, they've got to go in and see the attorney.
So there is some frontage on 3A, but it's unlikely that we'd come at it that way.
Right.
We could.
You could, but do you want to put I don't know what the deal was when we sold this, about a road.
This is
coming in.
you'd come in,
Yeah, you can come in here, Tack Factory Pond Drive, or it does come down here on Old Oakland Bucket.
yep.
So, and anyways, they're just looking for a letter of support from the conservation, basically just stating that, it's good, it's a wonderful swap, because it's double, plus we're protecting, the water supply.
Sounds like a good deal.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds promising as long as we can put like parking and trails. I don't know where you actually put parking. So if like the water department would let you put something, like how does this become publicly accessible if you can't park anywhere?
You walk.
Yeah.
But there's an easement in here. I don't see why you couldn't
Right.
put a road in sometime.
Okay, I'm just.
I mean, that's down the road.
Yeah, but no,
No, but it is good
but
road.
again, why take it if we can't access
Right,
it?
it
But
does have frontage though, so
There's a few different
Yeah.
options.
Okay. Yeah,
that's a real positive, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for that end of town, we could get some paths in there and some network that
Yeah.
people
Well,
could
that's what
use.
Frank and I thought when we
Yeah.
saw it, you know, down the road.
Yeah.
Once we get some of the other stuff done, we could start, you know, do something in this area of town.
Yeah,
But,
that sounds terrific.
If nothing else, it's protecting the water. This is the reservoir across the street.
Which is huge.
Huge, huge.
Yes.
Okay. So anyways.
Good job, you
I'll make
guys.
a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Second, all in favor? Okay. And just, if anybody's interested, tomorrow night, there's a meeting on trails at the library. The Trails Group is moving forward with markings, they're starting to plot the trails out. So they just want to update everybody on where they are at and colors of trails and. No good deed goes unpunished.
There's a lot of passion, which is important.
From Wicked.
Yeah.
Are you part of that group, Jen?
Motion to close?
What's that?
No,
As long as there's a chart that says
What's that?
pink is this and red.
At
Library.
the library.
Library.
Hold on, I need a couple of things.
Okay, good thing you piped in.
I know, I heard that close.
Ready to run?
Okay, quickly. So, we've been talking about trying to get consistent application submissions in to streamline hearings, you know, processing them not only from an office standpoint, but from a permitting and for both applicants, staff. Anyways, I've developed a checklist,
Oh,
Yes.
which is something that I was hoping that you would endorse, maybe a vote to institute that as part of our submission requirements to be signed by the applicant or the applicant's representative. So basically what it is it goes through the different things that we look for in each notice of intent or other application so that, you know, we don't have this
These are all required
missing
before you can
information.
submit. Yep.
Yes, you know, stuff
Good.
like,
Helpful.
the DEP data forms, the property locus deed, you know, just standard stuff that we look for in every application. So,
So if I'm understanding this, if they had
Resource
something that
areas.
was not checked off, we don't see it. It doesn't get to us until that's all checked off, am I correct?
right.
Good, so it has to be complete.
So in that
Well,
way, we,
That's what I was.
doesn't get stamped in until we verify
The
that.
clock doesn't start.
that they say
Yeah.
they
Good.
have everything.
Right, you don't have the resource areas, you don't have the foundation plan,
Right.
you know, that kind of
Yep.
stuff.
It's
This
gonna
is
let
terrific.
Carol and Amy take applications, not correct papers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Right,
Can-
plan
yeah,
submission.
do we have any, you have copies of that?
Yes. There, here's an example of what it would look like.
Good, and then you'll like scan it or send it out to us?
Yes,
Email?
give you a final version so we can
Yeah.
have comment before we absolutely finalize it. And what we'd like to do is get it off to the engineers that we work with on a regular basis and put it on our website, so that way
That's perfect.
there's no question about what we're looking for.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Help to improve time management.
Right, because
For
I mean,
everybody
not
involved.
only is it frustrating for you and for us and for the applicant, you know what I mean? It's, we all want the same thing, which is to get these things through the
Efficient.
system
Right.
as
And
efficiently
the more
as
ways you make it
possible.
easier, so
Yeah.
people know exactly what's expected.
Right, and so often an application will come in, you know, really complete, and then the next one, you know, it might not be so much.
Yep.
So,
Can it be a requirement that files be electronic as well? Because like sometimes we end up with these like paper ones and it's just harder to keep track of them.
I think that that would have to be written into our regulations.
Oh,
So this
okay.
is something that we can just vote on as a commission. The regulation, or the policy, right, we can administer it as a policy. Our website indicates that if you submit electronically, you're not required to give us as many written copies.
Yeah, you get
So,
3.
Yeah, I mean, because you're right, that's the other thing, is we've got paper overload.
Or
So
mine.
it would be nice to be able to just require electronic, but not everybody is,
No, no,
you know, got the technology, so some people
You're trying to
still
move
do
us
like-
into the 1990s. 1990s.
Not while I'm here. You gotta give me a paper, dear.
We've got somebody
You're gonna
here
give Penny a heart
that's like
attack.
to do it old school.
No paper?
Okay, so if you guys wanna,
Yeah, I make a motion that we,
Well, we're gonna get, you're gonna send that for, I mean,
Yes.
I don't know what else we'd do, but why don't you send that out to us and then we'll take a look and,
Okay,
all right?
so you don't wanna,
I don't know, I'm
Get it
just
going
wondering, do
right
we need to,
away?
do we need to add anything or whatever? Is there anything that's
vote to
missing?
do one.
vote to get it going as
Yes.
soon as we can,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
I make a motion
absolutely,
that
yeah.
we vote.
We like the idea, we're just
Do
gonna
the
review what it is.
checklist.
Yep,
Second.
yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then really quick, cease and desist went out to 23 Oceanside. You guys probably saw that.
Yeah,
That
when
was-
did it go
was-
out?
It was an emergency declaration project that went wild.
Right.
So, we had some timelines built into that, but that should hopefully be coming back to us. The rain makes it look pretty bad, I mean, but it definitely, they did more than just shore up the foundation, that's for sure.
They put all those rocks out front.
Yeah.
Which they probably could do.
They
but that
could
wasn't-
probably do that. We're waiting to hear from Mr. Kamen. I know Patrick reached out to him recently, because it seems like this is the, you know, really good time of year. We're in the planting window, but we're also in the mud season too, so we don't want them out there, you know, going crazy.
Decades. Decades. It's
We've
the
got
key word.
possible new action at the property on Stockbridge, which formerly was the Green Connection. Now it's a contractor's yard. It's
Yeah,
it's pre-existing, non-conforming, but
I have photos.
there's
No,
multiple.
not Stockbridge.
There's
She's
multiple
talking.
office infractions that, so conservation's one of them, where they've got buffer and probably resource area problems, which we thought they were getting better, but now perhaps it's not going in the right direction, so I'll just keep you apprised on that one.
Okay.
We're looking for somebody to step up to participate in the stormwater work group. So we've agreed to take a look at the regulations and the bylaw, and I know Frank is interested in partaking, but if anybody else is too, they're gonna be daytime meetings, probably a total of 4 or 5. It would be good to have, you know, a wide variety of people, because we want not just developers and engineers, but we want people that have resource protection in mind too, since that's. I
I'd be
think-
interested in participating for twofold. One, for improved knowledge. I'd be happy to,
Help coordinate some of, yeah, that would be good,
recap
Lisa.
and, you know.
Yeah,
process
Frank is
people
here,
out.
that, actually, the
Yeah.
TA is questioning whether Frank is employed practically by the town, because how much he volunteers.
I bet your
And
family
he's here
feels the
a
same way,
lot,
too.
so he's really,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, he's
It's a lot
all-star
of technical stuff,
volunteer.
but it would be really good to have another set
Yeah.
of eyes, and I think
Yeah.
you'd be a good
Yeah, I'm good
asset
at
for that,
putting
Lisa.
it together, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all-star
Sure.
volunteers, all of
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
are, actually.
It's,
Okay, and.
You can fly over
these
and
things are so
attend.
near and dear to our hearts, Amy, that we have to,
Well, it's a lot of fun too, right?
Oh, yeah.
the last meeting was not fun.
Okay,
This one was
that's
a
it.
little better.
Yeah.
That's all I have for you.
All right.
All right.
Are we done now?
Are we gonna share,
Oh.
can we share, or do we have to wait?
Minutes.
Penny,
Minutes.
what do you think?
What are you sharing?
I don't think, Frank, we want,
Minutes?
my field trips yesterday.
Yeah, we found some
Well,
things.
no, do you want to do that later?
Yeah, we can do that later on.
Okay,
Oh, okay. All right. I
Motion
make
to adjourn.
A second.
all in favor, oops. So
have a second. You can say
Carol, did you want to get the minutes?
Carol's minutes.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, we
Oh,
didn't,
we haven't voted.
we haven't voted.
Oh, I make a motion, we accept the minutes of February 21st. As written, they were such nice minutes.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now can we
Stop laughing.
adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Yay.
No,
I
he
second.
doesn't want to.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right.
All right, so can we share the